I walked into my sister's wedding with my head high, until my mother laughed loud enough for strangers to turn. She called me their little independent mistake, and my sister smiled like she had been waiting 9 years to watch me shrink. Then her fiancé went dead pale and said the one sentence that made the whole room freeze. Before I tell you what he recognized, subscribe if you have ever been the extra in your own family. My name is Scarlett Ross, and for the last 9 years, I have been a ghost in the lives of the people who created me. I did not plan to stop being a ghost today. In fact, if things had gone according to my very meticulous, very safe plan, I would have remained nothing more than a blurred face in the background of a crowded ballroom, a +1 attached to a name on a guest list that had absolutely nothing to do with my DNA. The venue was one of those sprawling, aggressive displays of Southern wealth that Charleston does so well. It was a historic hotel right on the river, the kind of place where the humidity feels heavy with money and old secrets. The air smelled of jasmine and expensive perfume, a scent that instantly made my stomach tighten. I smoothed the fabric of my dress, a simple navy silk that cost me 3 weeks of salary but looked effortless. That was the trick I had learned over the last decade. You have to look like you belong, even when every cell in your body is screaming that you are trespassing. Noah squeezed my hand. His grip was warm, dry, and steady. He was the reason we were here. My husband works in high-level financial auditing, specifically for a firm that handles compliance for massive healthcare networks. He had received the invitation not because he was family, but because the groom, Julian, was a rising star doctor in a network Noah's firm was currently reviewing. It was a professional courtesy invite, a networking opportunity. Noah had hesitated when he saw the bride's name on the card, but I had told him it was fine. I told him I was ready. I was lying. We walked through the grand double doors of the hotel lobby, the heels of my shoes clicking against the marble floor. The sound echoed too loudly in my ears. The reception was being held in the main ballroom, but the cocktail hour had spilled out into the grand hallway, a cavernous space lined with portraits of people who looked like they would judge you for using the wrong fork. I kept my eyes moving, scanning the crowd. I was looking for exits. I was looking for corners. I was looking for the bar. I was trying to do the math in my head. If we stayed for 45 minutes, shook hands with the groom, nodded at the bride from a distance, and then claimed a headache, we could be back in our rental car by 8 o'clock. "You okay?" Noah asked, his voice low. He adjusted his glasses, looking sharp and harmless in his tuxedo. He knew the broad strokes of my history, but he didn't know the texture of it. He didn't know how sharp the edges were. "I am fine," I said, forcing a smile that felt tight on my face. "Just looking for the champagne." We moved deeper into the crowd. I saw faces I recognized from a lifetime ago, neighbors who used to ignore me while they waved at my sister, cousins who had stopped sending birthday cards the year I turned 18. They looked older, softer, settled into their comforts. None of them looked at me. To them, I was just another anonymous woman in a nice dress, clinging to the arm of a man who looked like he understood tax law. And then, the air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. I didn't hear her approach. I felt her. It was a sensation like cold water trickling down the back of my neck. "Who let her in here?" The voice was unmistakable. It cut through the low hum of conversation like a serrated knife. It was louder than it needed to be. It was always louder than it needed to be. I froze. Noah stopped walking. Sensing the tension in my arm, I turned slowly, not because I wanted to, but because the command in that voice was buried deep in my nervous system. Marianne stood 10 feet away. My mother. She was wearing a silver gown that probably cost more than my first car. Her hair was perfectly coiffed, her makeup flawless, her face a mask of incredulous rage. She wasn't looking at me with love. She wasn't looking at me with longing. She was looking at me like I was a stain on her perfect white carpet. She took a step forward, her eyes darting to the guests around us to make sure they were witnessing this. She wanted an audience. She always performed better with an audience. "Look who crawled back," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness that barely covered the venom. She gestured to me with a champagne flute, the liquid sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "Our little independent mistake." She hit the word independent with a heavy mocking emphasis, dragging out the syllables. It wasn't a compliment. In her mouth, it was a slur. It was a joke she expected everyone else to laugh at. A few people turned. I saw the confusion on their faces. They saw a well-dressed woman standing next to a respectable man. They didn't see the mistake she was talking about, but they sensed the drama, and human beings are naturally drawn to the scent of blood. "Hello, Mother," I said. My voice was calm. I had practiced this voice in the mirror for 9 years. It was the voice of a woman who pays her own rent, who buys her own insurance, who owns her own life. "We are just here to offer our congratulations." "Congratulations?" The word came from behind Marianne. The crowd parted, and there she was, Cora, my sister, the bride. She looked stunning. I had to give her that. Her dress was a masterpiece of lace and silk, fitted to perfection, expanding into a train that took up half the hallway. She looked like a princess. She looked like a queen. And she looked at me with the same expression she had worn when we were 12, and she had broken a vase and blamed it on me. It was a look of pure, unadulterated entitlement. "Did you come to apologize or to ask for money?" Cora asked. She didn't shout. She didn't have to. She projected her voice with the confidence of someone who has never been told no in her entire life. She walked towards me, her veil trailing behind her like storm clouds. I felt Noah stiffen beside me. He started to step forward, to shield me, but I put a hand on his arm. This was not his fight, not yet. "I do not need your money, Cora," I said, keeping my chin level. "And I have nothing to apologize for. We were invited. We are guests." "Invited?" Cora laughed. It was a sharp, barking sound. "You were not invited. You were erased. Do you have any idea how much work it took to explain why you are not in the family photos? Do you know how hard it is to tell people your sister is unavailable?" "I was not unavailable," I said. "I was just cut off." "You chose that," Marianne snapped, stepping up beside Cora to form a united front, a wall of silver and white. "We gave you a choice. You chose to leave. You chose to be independent. So be independent. Outside." The hallway was becoming a theater. The music from the ballroom, a lively jazz number, filtered through the doors, creating a grotesque contrast to the scene unfolding in the corridor. Guests were openly staring now. Waiters had paused with their trays. The air was thick with the thrill of a public execution. "We are leaving," I said. I turned to Noah. "Let us go." I didn't want a scene. I didn't want to win. I just wanted to breathe air that didn't taste like their perfume. But as I turned to walk away, Cora stepped sideways, blocking my path. For a woman in a heavy wedding dress, she moved fast. "Oh, no," Cora said. "You do not get to just walk away and play the victim. You do not get to come here, ruin my mood, and then leave like a martyr. You want to make a scene? Fine. Let's make sure everyone knows exactly what you are." "Cora, stop," I said. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but my face remained stone. "This is your wedding. Go back inside. Dance with your husband. Forget I was here." "I can't forget you," she hissed, stepping into my personal space. "You are like a bad smell, Scarlett. You always have been. Jealous, petty, poor." Noah stepped in then. He didn't push her, but he placed his body between Cora and me. "That is enough," he said. His voice was professional, the voice he used when a client was trying to hide assets. "We are leaving. Get out of our way." Cora looked at Noah like he was a piece of furniture that had suddenly started speaking. She blinked, offended that he dared to address her directly. Then, she turned her head toward the ballroom doors and screamed, "Julian! Julian! Get out here!" It was a summons. It was the call of a child who knows that when she screams, the adults come running to fix it. Marianne crossed her arms, a smug smile playing on her lips. That is right. Let Julian handle this. He does not tolerate trash. I wanted to run. Every instinct I had developed over the last 9 years told me to run, but the hallway was blocked by the dress, by the mother, by the crowd of onlookers who had formed a semicircle around us. We were trapped. The ballroom doors swung open. Julian stepped out. He looked every bit the perfect groom, tall, handsome, with the kind of jawline that suggests strong genetics and expensive dentistry. He was adjusting his cufflinks, looking slightly annoyed at being pulled away from his party. "Cora?" he asked, scanning the group. "What is going on?" "I was talking to Senator Miller." "This woman," Cora pointed a manicured finger at my face, her hand shaking with rage, "is trying to ruin our wedding. She crashed the reception. She is harassing Mom. Get her out of here. Julian, call security. Have her thrown in the river for all I care." Julian sighed. The sigh of a man who is used to solving problems he considers beneath him. He walked towards us, his eyes fixed on the floor for a second as he composed his authority figure face. "Look," he started, looking up at Noah first, assuming he was the threat. "I don't know who you think you are, but this is a private event and—" Then his eyes slid to me. He stopped. It wasn't a normal pause. It was the kind of stop that happens when a car hits a wall. His entire body went rigid. The color drained out of his face so fast it looked like a magic trick. 1 second he was flushed with champagne and arrogance, and the next he was gray, ash gray. He looked at me. He looked at my eyes. He looked at the way I was standing. I didn't know him. I had never met Julian in my life. I knew his name from the invitation, and I knew his profession from Noah's briefing, but I had never looked this man in the eye. But he knew me. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He blinked rapidly, 3, 4 times, as if his brain was trying to reboot, trying to match the face in front of him with a file in his head that was marked danger. "Julian?" Cora asked, her voice faltering. She sensed the shift. The air in the hallway had changed from hot anger to something cold and sharp. "Julian, what are you doing? Kick her out!" Julian didn't hear her. He took a half step back, almost tripping over his own expensive shoes. He raised a hand, pointing at me, but his finger was trembling. "Wait," he whispered. It was barely a sound. Marianne stepped forward, impatient. "Julian, darling, it is just Scarlett, my other daughter, the one we told you about. The disappointment, just tell her to leave." Julian ignored her. He ignored his new wife. He ignored the guests whispering behind their hands. His eyes were locked on mine with a terrifying intensity. It was the look of a man who sees the executioner standing in his living room. He cleared his throat. It sounded like rattling dry leaves. "Wait a minute," he said, his voice gaining a little volume, but trembling with a frequency that vibrated through the silent hallway. He looked at Noah. Then he looked back at me. He connected the dots, the audit firm, the invite, the wife. Scarlett Ross. He said my name like it was a diagnosis he had been praying not to hear. "Do you know her?" Cora demanded, her jealousy flaring up instantly, overriding her confusion. "How do you know her?" Julian didn't look at Cora. He couldn't take his eyes off me. He looked like he was about to be sick on the marble floor. "Scarlett Ross," he said again, and this time, the words carried the weight of a gavel coming down. "You are from Ravenwood Compliance Labs." The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum. I didn't say yes. I didn't say no. I just stood there, watching the blood drain out of my family's perfect image, watching the first crack appear in the glass house they had built over 9 years of lies. I didn't know exactly what Julian was hiding, but looking at the terror in his eyes, I knew one thing for sure. It was big, and I had just walked right through the front door. The ballroom faded. Julian's terrified face, Cora's rage, and my mother's sneer all dissolved into a gray static. I was not standing in a luxury hotel in Charleston anymore. I was 17 years old again. standing in a kitchen that smelled of lemon polish and expensive coffee, holding a piece of paper that I thought was my ticket to freedom. It was a Tuesday in April. I remember the day because it was raining, the kind of relentless spring rain that makes everything look washed out and gray. I had retrieved the mail before anyone else got home, my heart hammering against my ribs as I saw the thick envelope with the university crest stamped in blue ink. It was a good school, not an Ivy League, perhaps, but a Tier 1 state university with a nursing program that was respected across the country. I had worked for 4 years to get that envelope. I had studied by flashlight when my parents turned the hallway lights off to save electricity. I had taken extra credit assignments. I had curated a GPA that was almost perfect. I laid the letter on the granite island in the center of the kitchen. I smoothed out the creases. I waited. When my father, Victor, walked in, he did not look at me. He placed his briefcase on the counter and went straight for the refrigerator to pour himself a glass of iced tea. He was wearing his usual armor, a crisp suit that cost more than I would make in a year at my part-time job. I got in, I said. My voice was small, but it was steady. I pushed the letter toward him. The acceptance letter came today. Victor took a sip of his tea. He glanced at the letter, reading the first line, and then he pushed it back toward me with a single finger. He did not smile. He did not say congratulations. "And?" he asked. "And?" I swallowed the lump in my throat. "I need to send the deposit by the 1st of May, and then there is the tuition schedule. I have the breakdown here. If I get the student loans I qualify for, I still need help with the gap. It is about $4,000 a semester." Victor laughed. It was a short, dry sound, like a branch snapping in winter. $4,000, he repeated. He looked at me then, really looked at me, with eyes that were devoid of any warmth. "You think I am going to pay $4,000 a semester for you to go read books and party?" "I am not going to party," I said, feeling the heat rise in my cheeks. "I am going to study nursing. I have a plan." "Here is a better plan," Victor said. He leaned forward, placing both hands on the counter. "You want to study? You figure out how to pay for it. You want to eat? You buy your own food. This house teaches you to be independent. Scarlett, we are not raising leeches here." Independent, that was the word. That was the weapon they used to beat me into submission while convincing the neighbors they were just instilling strong values. I might have believed him if I had not been there 3 days later. It was Friday. The rain had stopped, and the sun was shining on the driveway where a used but very reliable silver sedan was parked with a red bow on the hood. Cora was standing in the driveway, squealing, jumping up and down in her socks. "It is perfect," she screamed. "Daddy, it is perfect." I watched from the living room window. I watched as Victor handed her the keys, a smile stretching across his face that I had not seen in years. I watched as Marianne, my mother, came out with a folder in her hands. Later that evening, they sat at the same granite island where my acceptance letter had been dismissed. Marianne had the checkbook open. "Tuition is covered," Marianne said, her pen scratching loudly across the paper. "And we paid for the upgraded meal plan. Cora, because we do not want you worrying about cooking while you are adjusting to classes, and the dorm deposit is sent." "I need a new laptop," Cora said, scrolling through her phone. "The one I have is too heavy to carry around campus." "Order the one you want," Victor said, not even looking up from his tablet. "Put it on the family card. We want you to be safe and prepared. You are going to be far away. Honey, we need to make sure you have everything." I stood in the doorway. I should have turned around. I should have walked away and saved myself the humiliation. But at 17, hope is a stubborn thing. It does not die easily. "What about me?" I asked. The silence that followed was heavy. They all turned to look at me. Cora looked annoyed that I had interrupted her laptop shopping. Marianne looked exhausted, as if my very presence was a chore she had not finished. "What about you?" Marianne asked. "You are paying for Cora's tuition," I said, my voice trembling. "Her dorm, her car, her food. I am just asking for the gap. I will work. I will pay for my own books. I just need the tuition help. Cora is different, Victor said, his voice cold. Cora needs support. She is sensitive. She is not like you. You are hard. You can handle things. Cora needs a safety net. You need to learn how to survive. So because I am capable, I get punished? I asked. Watch your tone, Marianne snapped. We do not owe you anything, Scarlett. You turned 18 in October. Legally, we are done. The fact that we let you sleep here is a kindness. I tried one last time. I lowered my pride. I scraped the bottom of my dignity. Okay, I said. Okay, I will not go to the university. I will go to the community college down the road. It is much cheaper. $600 a class. Can you help me with that? Just the first semester? Until I can get full-time hours? Marianne looked at Victor. For a second, just 1 second, I thought she might agree. $600 was nothing to them. It was less than the suit Victor was wearing. Then she laughed. She covered her mouth with her hand, shaking her head. Oh, Scarlett, she said, you really have no shame, do you? Begging like this, it is unbecoming. If you want to take classes, you pay for them. In fact, since you are so eager to talk about money, let us discuss your contribution to this household. Contribution? I asked. You are working at the diner, correct? Victor asked. 20 hours a week? Yes, I said. I am saving for a car. Not anymore, Victor said. From now on, 30% of your paycheck goes to us. For rent, for electricity, for the water you use. You live in this house. You pay your way. You want to be an adult? Welcome to the real world. I looked at them. I looked at Cora, who was smirking behind her phone. I looked at my parents, who were looking at me with absolute contempt. And in that moment, something inside me broke. But it was not a loud break. It was a quiet snap, like a lock clicking into place. I went to my room. I did not cry. I reached into my drawer and pulled out my old cell phone, the one with the cracked screen. I turned on the voice recorder app. I walked back out to the kitchen. I just want to be clear, I said, holding the phone hidden in the pocket of my hoodie. You are refusing to help me with school, but you are paying for everything for Cora? And you are demanding I pay you rent to live in my childhood home while I'm still in high school? We are teaching you a lesson, Victor said, his voice loud and clear. You need to learn independence. Cora is our responsibility. You are on your own. Stop asking for handouts. And the money for the rent? I asked. You want cash? Cash, Marianne said. Every Friday. Do not make us ask for it. I went back to my room and stopped the recording. I saved the file. I backed it up to a cloud account I had created at the library. I did not record them to use it in court. I did not record them for revenge. I recorded them because I knew, even then, that they were gaslighters. I knew that in 10 years, they would tell a different story. They would say they did everything they could. They would say I was ungrateful. I needed proof, not for the world, but for myself. I needed to know that I was not crazy. I needed to know that their cruelty was real. 2 weeks later, I graduated high school. They came to the ceremony, took one picture with me, and then left early to take Cora to a celebratory dinner for finishing her junior year with a B average. That night, I packed. I did not have much. I had 1 suitcase. I packed my uniforms for the diner. I packed my 3 pairs of jeans. I packed the 1 pair of good shoes I owned. I took the $300 I had managed to hide in a hollowed-out book. The money they did not know about. I left a note on the counter. It was not emotional. It just said, I am being independent. Do not look for me. I walked out of the house at 4 a.m. The streetlights were humming. The air was cool. I walked 3 miles to the bus station. As I sat on the bench, waiting for the first bus out of town, I made a vow. I whispered it to the empty street. I will never ask for their money again. I will never ask for their love again. I will never give them the power to say no to me ever again. The next 9 years were a blur of exhaustion. I did not go to the university. I went to a city 2 hours away where the rent was cheap and the jobs were plentiful. I worked at a diner during the day. I stocked shelves at a grocery store at night. My feet ached so badly that some nights I had to soak them in ice water just to be able to stand the next morning. I enrolled in community college a year later. I took 2 classes at a time. I paid for every credit hour with crumpled bills I earned from tips. I sat in the back of the class, wearing my waitress uniform, smelling like French fries and old coffee, fighting to keep my eyes open while the professor talked about anatomy and physiology. I watched other students call their parents to ask for money for pizza. I watched them complain about having to wake up for a 10 o'clock class. I felt a distance from them that was measured in light years. They were children. I was a machine built for survival. I applied for loans when I transferred to the nursing program. I read every single line of the contracts. I was terrified of debt. I signed my name with a shaking hand, knowing that if I failed, there was no one to bail me out. There was no safety net. If I fell, I hit the concrete, so I did not fall. I graduated with honors. I got my license. I got a job at a small hospital, then a better one at a larger clinic. I paid my loans every month, $100 here, $200 there. I never missed a payment. I never paid a cent of late fees. My credit score rose, point by point. A slow climb out of the hole my parents had thrown me into. It was a lonely life. I did not date much. Men found my intensity off-putting. I did not know how to relax. I did not know how to just hang out if I was not working. I was losing money. That was the equation in my head. Then I met Noah. It was a Tuesday, just like the day I got my acceptance letter. I was sitting in a hospital cafeteria, staring at a cup of cold coffee, trying to summon the energy to drive home after a 12-hour shift. He was sitting at the next table. He was wearing a suit, but his tie was loosened. He looked tired, too. He looked over at me. "You look like you have been carrying the weight of the world," he said. It was not a pickup line. It was just an observation. "Something like that," I said. "I am Noah," he said. "I am an auditor. I stare at spreadsheets until my eyes bleed. What is your excuse?" "Scarlett," I said. "Nurse, I stare at veins until I forget my own name." He smiled. It was a kind smile. It did not want anything from me. We talked for an hour. He did not ask me where I was from. He did not ask me what my father did for a living. He did not ask me why I was driving a 10-year-old car with a dent in the bumper. He asked me what books I liked. He asked me if I preferred the ocean or the mountains. And then, as I stifled a yawn, he asked the question that made me stop. "Are you getting enough sleep, Scarlett?" I looked at him. I waited for the follow-up. I waited for him to ask for a favor, or a date, or a way into my life, but he was just looking at me with genuine concern. He saw me. He did not see a project. He did not see a disappointment. He saw a tired woman who deserved rest. "No," I said, my voice quiet. "I am not." "You should go home," he said gently. "The coffee will not help anymore. Go sleep, if you want. We can get fresh coffee when you are actually awake. Maybe Saturday?" I drove home that night with a strange feeling in my chest. It was not excitement. It was not the adrenaline of survival. It was something slower, deeper. It was peace, for the first time in 9 years. I realized that I did not have to fight everyone I met. I realized that independence did not have to mean isolation. I had built a fortress to keep the world out. But Noah had just knocked on the door and asked if I wanted a glass of water. I married him 2 years later. We paid for the wedding ourselves. It was small. It was quiet. It was perfect. I did not invite my parents. I did not invite Cora. I thought I was done with them. I thought I had escaped. But standing in that hallway in Charleston, staring into the terrified eyes of my sister's fiancé, I realized that the past is not a place you can just drive away from. It is a shadow, and sometimes, when the light hits just right, the shadow stands up and chokes you. My father had told me to be independent. He had no idea just how independent I had become. And he had no idea that the independent mistake he had cast out was about to bring his entire world crashing down. The silence that followed Julian's declaration was not empty. It was heavy, pressurized, and suffocating. The name Ravenwood Compliance Labs hung in the air between us like a suspended guillotine blade. I watched the color drain from my mother's face. Not because she understood the financial implications. Marianne never bothered with the details of how money was made, only how it was spent, but because she understood loss of control. She saw the look on her new son-in-law's face, and for the first time in her life, she realized her charm was not going to be enough to fix this. But she was a professional at one thing, rewriting reality until it suited her. Marianne stepped forward, placing a manicured hand on Julian's arm. Her touch was possessive, almost claw-like. She laughed, but it was a brittle, frantic sound that cracked around the edges. "Oh, Julian, honestly," she said, her voice pitching up an octave. "Do not be ridiculous. Ravenwood? Scarlett probably works in the cafeteria there. If she works there at all. You know how she is." She turned her eyes to the crowd, addressing the onlookers as if she were hosting a charity auction and things had just gone slightly off script. "My daughter," she gestured vaguely at me, "has always had a very vivid imagination. She tends to exaggerate. It is a condition. Really, we have tried to get her help for years, but she refuses medication. It is tragic." I stood perfectly still. 9 years ago. That accusation would have made me scream. It would have made me cry and defend myself, which would only have made me look unstable, proving her point. That was their trap. If you react to the lie, you validate it. But I was not 17 anymore. I was 26, and I had spent nearly a decade in rooms with surgeons, auditors, and hospital administrators. I knew how to hold a room without raising my voice. "I am not here to tell stories, Mother," I said. My voice was low, level, and completely devoid of the hysteria she was hoping for. "I am here because my husband, Noah, received an invitation addressed to him and a guest. I am the guest. I am not here to cause a scene. I am not here to ask for anything. I simply walked through a door." Cora, sensing that her mother's tactic was failing, decided to double down. She smoothed the front of her wedding dress. Regaining her posture, she looked at Julian, her eyes wide and pleading, trying to summon the innocence that had likely charmed him in the first place. "Julian, baby," she cooed. "Don't listen to her. She is just jealous. She has been jealous of me since we were little girls. She cannot stand it when I'm happy. She probably found out about the wedding and came here specifically to ruin my moment, because she knows she will never have a day like this." She looked at me with a sneer that was pure poison. "Look at her dress. It is off the rack. She hates that I am the one in the spotlight. She is toxic. Julian, that is why we cut her off. For our own mental health, it was a good performance. If I were a stranger, I might have believed it. But Julian was not looking at Cora. He was looking at me, and then he looked at Noah. Noah was standing beside me, not aggressively, but with the solid, immovable presence of a man who knows exactly who he is. He adjusted his glasses, looking from Marianne to Cora with a mixture of pity and professional disdain. He looked like an auditor who had just found a discrepancy in the ledger and was waiting for the explanation he knew would be a lie. Julian's eyes darted back and forth. The fear I had seen earlier was shifting. It was hardening into something else. Suspicion. He pulled his arm away from Marianne's grasp. It was a subtle movement, but it spoke volumes. "She works at Ravenwood," Julian said, his voice flat. He was speaking to himself more than anyone else. "I know the team roster. I saw the preliminary email. Ross. I thought it was a man. Simon or Samuel." He looked me in the eye. "You are Ross? The senior analyst?" "I am," I confirmed. "And Noah is the lead auditor." Julian closed his eyes for a brief second. He took a deep breath. When he opened them, the groom mask was gone. The doctor mask was gone. What was left was a man who was realizing he was standing on quicksand. He turned slowly to face his bride. "Cora," he said. "Julian, please." Cora started, reaching for his hand again. "Let's just have security take them out. The cake is about to be cut. Everyone is waiting." "Cora," he repeated, louder this time. He did not take her hand. "You told me you were an only child." The hallway went dead silent. The background music from the ballroom seemed to fade away. The guests who were eavesdropping leaned in closer. This was the plot twist. This was the moment the picture-perfect romance hit the jagged rocks of reality. Cora froze. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. She blinked, her mind racing to find a way out of the absolute she had painted herself into. She stammered. I mean, "We have been together for 2 years, Julian said, his voice trembling with repressed anger. 2 years. You told me you were an only child. You told my parents you were an only child. You filled out the premarital counseling forms and checked the box for 0 siblings." Cora let out a high-pitched, incredulous laugh. It sounded forced, like glass grinding in a disposal. "Well, obviously," she said, waving her hand dismissively toward me as if I were a piece of furniture that had been placed in the wrong room. Effectively, I am the only child who matters, the only one who is actually part of this family. Scarlett left years ago. She is dead to us. So, yes, I am an only child. Why are you getting so hung up on technicalities?" "Technicalities?" Julian asked. "You lied to me about your own biology." "It is not a lie." Cora stomped her foot, the heavy silk of her dress rustling violently. "It is the truth of how we live. She does not count, Julian. She is nobody. Why are you taking her side? This is our wedding day." "She is not taking anyone's side." Noah stepped forward. His voice was not loud, but it carried a weight that made Victor, my father, take a half step back. "She is standing here, existing, and no one, not you, not your mother, and certainly not the bride, has the right to humiliate my wife." Marianne's eyes narrowed. She shifted her target. She realized she could not bully me anymore. I was too cold, too distant. So she went for the husband, she assumed, because of her own worldview, that every man had a price, and every marriage was a transaction. "Oh, please," Marianne spat, looking Noah up and down with a sneer. "Do not play the noble husband. We know what this is. She found herself a man with a decent paycheck and latched on. It is what she does. She probably spun you some sob story about her cruel parents to get you to open your wallet. Did she tell you she tried to extort us before she left? Did she tell you she demanded money from us just to follow the rules of our house?" I felt Noah's hand tighten on mine. He knew the truth. He had seen the bank statements. He had seen the loans I paid off. He knew exactly how much extortion had happened. "She told me everything," Noah said calmly, "and I have seen the financial records to back it up. Unlike this family, Scarlett keeps excellent receipts." "She married you for money," Marianne shouted, losing her composure entirely. "That is all she cares about. She is a gold digger who was angry we cut off her supply." I was about to speak, to defend Noah, to tell them that we split our bills 50-50, that I made more money last year than my father likely did, but Julian spoke first, and what he said stopped the world on its axis. He was looking at Cora again, staring at her with a look of profound confusion and dawning horror. He was piecing together a puzzle, and the picture that was forming was ugly. "Money," Julian whispered. He looked at Cora. "You said Scarlett was the one who needed money." "She is," Cora cried. "She is destitute. Look at her." "But," Julian interrupted her, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper that was somehow louder than a scream. "You told me you graduated from nursing school." I stiffened. I looked at Julian sharply. Cora went pale. Not the pale of a blushing bride, but the waxy, gray pale of a corpse. "What?" she squeaked. "When we met," Julian said, stepping closer to her. "At the hospital fundraiser. You told me you had a nursing degree. You said you understood the pressure I was under because you had done the clinical rotations. You said you graduated from the state university. My heart stopped. The state university. The nursing program. The one I had been accepted to. The one I had to decline because my parents refused to help with the gap funding. I did study, Cora stammered, backing away. I looked at our marriage license application last week, Julian said. I was double-checking the paperwork for the name change, and I noticed something. In the education section, you left it blank, and in the background check required for the hospital insurance, there is a gap, a 4-year gap, where you said you were in school. He looked from Cora to me. He looked at my calm face. He looked at the intelligence in my eyes. He looked at the woman who was a senior analyst at Ravenwood. Then he looked back at his wife, the woman who needed her parents to buy her a car, who needed a new laptop because the old one was heavy, who claimed to be an only child. You are not a nurse, are you? Julian asked. I took classes, Cora yelled, her voice cracking. I took a lot of classes. It was too hard. The professors were unfair. I took a break. Does it matter? I am marrying a doctor. I do not need to work. Why are you bringing this up now? Because, Julian said, and he looked like he was about to vomit. You didn't just lie about being an only child. You stole her life story. He pointed at me. Scarlett is the nurse, Julian said. Scarlett is the one who made it. You just used her resume to get my attention. The accusation hung there. It was grotesque. It was pathetic. And looking at Cora's face, watching the way her eyes darted frantically to her mother for help, I knew it was true. Cora had not just taken the tuition money that could have been mine. She had not just taken the car and the easy life. She had met a doctor. And realizing she had nothing interesting to say, she had adopted the one ambition she had watched her sister fight for and lose. She had cosplayed as me to land a husband. It is not stealing, Marianne interjected, stepping between them. Cora is sophisticated. She knows about medicine. She has listened to us talk for years. Who cares about a piece of paper? She is your wife. Julian, focus on that. Is she? Julian asked. He looked at the woman in the white dress. Because right now, I feel like I'm looking at a stranger. This is ridiculous, Victor barked, checking his watch as if this moral collapse was cutting into his schedule. Julian, stop this nonsense. We have guests. We have a reputation. You are stressed. It is the wedding jitters. Cora, fix your makeup. Scarlett, leave, now. No, Julian said. He turned to Noah. He ignored his father-in-law completely. Noah, Julian said. His voice was urgent now, professional. You are in audit at Ravenwood. You are the lead on the Brightwater account. Noah nodded slowly. I am. Then you have the files, Julian said. The vendor lists, the contractor payouts. I cannot discuss active audits, Noah said smoothly. I am not asking you to discuss it, Julian said. He took a step closer to Noah, lowering his voice, but in the acoustic perfection of the hallway. We could all hear him. I am asking you a question, a personal question, because I need to know who I am standing next to. Julian swallowed hard. My name is on a contract with Brightwater, Julian said, for consulting services, but I never signed a consulting contract. I got an email last week asking me to justify billing hours that I never worked. I thought it was a clerical error. I thought it was a glitch. He looked at Cora. Then he looked at Victor. But if my wife lies about her name, Julian said, his voice shaking, and if her father handles her finances... Julian turned to Victor. Victor, you set up my LLC. You said it was for tax purposes. You handle the bookkeeping. Victor's face, usually a mask of arrogant boredom, twitched. It was a tiny movement, a spasm under the left eye. We are helping you maximize your returns, Victor said. His voice was tight. That is what family does. Did you bill Brightwater in my name? Julian asked. For work I did not do? Do not be absurd, Victor snapped. This is not the place for business. It is the place. Scarlett, I finally spoke. I took a step forward. Because Noah and I are not just here for the cake, Julian. We are here because Ravenwood flagged a pattern of phantom vendors, and one of those vendors is linked to an address that belongs to the Ross Family Trust. Scarlett! Marianne shrieked. Shut your mouth. You wanted me to leave, I said calmly. I am happy to leave, but if I walk out those doors, I take the professional courtesy with me. Noah was kind enough to come here and see if this was a misunderstanding before the official subpoenas go out on Monday. But if you want us to go, we will go, and the next time you see a Ross, it will be a federal agent, Cora gasped. She looked at Julian. Julian, do something! She is threatening Daddy! Julian did not move. He looked at his father-in-law. He looked at the man who had bought the wedding, the dress, the flowers, and he realized who had actually paid for it. You, Julian said to Victor, you have been using my medical license number. I was investing for your future, Victor hissed. For Cora's future. By committing fraud? Julian shouted. Lower your voice, Marianne hissed. The senator is inside. I don't care about the senator, Julian yelled. I care about my license. I care about going to jail. He turned to Noah. He looked desperate. He looked like a man drowning. Noah, he said. Is it true? Is that why you are here? Noah looked at me. I nodded. We are here, Noah said, because your name came up on a list of high-risk anomalies, and because Scarlett recognized the pattern. She told me, my parents don't give money away. If they are spending it, they are taking it from somewhere else. She was right. Julian looked at Cora one last time. She was crying now. Black mascara running down her face, ruining the perfect makeup. I didn't know, she sobbed. I just wanted a nice wedding. I just wanted to be happy. You wanted to be happy, Julian said, his voice dead. So you let them use me, just like you used her. He gestured to me. I need a minute, Julian said. He grabbed Noah's arm. I need to talk to you, privately, now. No, Cora grabbed Julian's other arm. You cannot leave me here. It is our reception. Get off me, Julian said. He ripped his arm away with such force that Cora stumbled back, tripping on her train. She fell onto the marble floor in a heap of white tulle and lace. She looked up, expecting him to help her, expecting the world to stop and rush to her aid. But Julian turned his back on her. He looked at Noah. Where can we talk? Outside, Noah said. Away from the family. Wait, I said. Before you go, I looked at Marianne. She was trembling with rage, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. You said I was a mistake, I said to her. You said I was an independent mistake. I leaned in close, so only she could hear the steel in my voice. You were right about the independent part. But the mistake? The mistake was thinking you could build a life on lies and invite an auditor to celebrate it. I turned to Julian. Ask her about the student loans. Julian, when you are done asking about the consulting fees, ask her whose name is on the debt for the degree Cora never earned. Marianne's eyes widened. She lunged for me, a desperate, animalistic swipe of her hand. You bitch! Noah caught her wrist before she could touch me. He didn't squeeze. He just held it there, suspended in the air. Careful, Noah said. Assault is another charge, and we are already at capacity for today. He dropped her hand. She stumbled back, colliding with Victor. Let's go, I said to Noah. We walked toward the exit, Julian trailing behind us like a ghost. Behind us, on the floor. The bride was weeping, not for her marriage, but for her humiliation, and her parents stood over her, not helping her up, but arguing in hushed, vicious whispers about who had let the secret slip. The music from the ballroom finally stopped. The party was over. The audit had begun. Julian did not let us leave. He did not simply watch us walk away into the humid Charleston night. Instead, he moved with a frantic energy that was entirely at odds with the polished, slow-moving confidence he had displayed just 10 minutes earlier. He lunged past his weeping bride, ignoring the way her dress pooled on the floor like spilled milk, and physically grabbed Noah by the sleeve of his tuxedo. "Noah," Julian said. His voice was breathless, stripped of all social pleasantries. "Stop. Just stop for a second." Noah stopped. He looked down at Julian's hand on his arm, his expression mild but warning. Julian released him immediately, holding his hands up in a gesture of surrender. But he did not step back. He stepped closer, invading our personal space, creating a tight, conspiratorial circle that excluded the rest of the room, but unfortunately included my parents, who had scrambled over to protect their investment. "You said you are with Ravenwood," Julian said, his eyes darting between Noah and me. "I need to know, is that real? Are you actually in the audit division? Or was that just something you said to scare Victor?" "I do not make jokes about my job," Noah said calmly. "And I certainly do not impersonate federal compliance officers. I am a senior lead auditor for Ravenwood Compliance Labs. Scarlett is a senior analyst. We are based out of the Atlanta regional office." The blood drained from Julian's face so completely that for a moment, I thought he might faint. It was not the reaction of a man who was embarrassed. It was the reaction of a man who had just heard the lock click shut on his cell door. "Atlanta," Julian whispered. He ran a hand through his perfectly styled hair, messing it up for the first time. "You are the team handling the Brightwater Health Alliance contract." It was not a question. It was a statement of doom. Noah did not answer. He did not have to. His silence was the confirmation. Ravenwood was indeed in the middle of a massive, sprawling audit of Brightwater, the healthcare conglomerate that employed half the doctors in the state, including, evidently, the groom. "Oh my God," Julian breathed. He looked at me, and suddenly, the recognition in his eyes shifted. Before, when he had first seen me, he had been confused. He had been trying to place a face from a personnel file. But now he looked at me, and he saw the executioner. He realized that the S. Ross, he had likely cursed at in internal memos, was standing 3 feet away from him, wearing a navy silk dress and knowing exactly what his billing codes looked like. "I got an email," Julian said, his voice trembling. He was talking fast, spilling secrets right there in the hotel hallway, desperate to get ahead of the avalanche. "Last week, Tuesday, it was from the compliance office. They said there were irregular metrics in my outpatient billing. They said I needed to prepare a variance report." He looked at Noah, pleading. "I thought it was a mistake. I thought it was just the system flagging high volume. But if you are here, if you are personally here—" "If we are here," I said, stepping in, "it means the metrics are not just irregular. Julian, it means they are impossible." Julian flinched as if I had slapped him. "I didn't do it," he said, his voice rising in panic. I signed the charts. Yes, I have to sign the charts. But the coding? The upcharging for complexity? I don't handle that. The practice manager handles that, and the external consultants handle the optimization." He spun around to look at Victor. My father was standing by a decorative fern, trying to look like a man who was merely bored, but I could see the sweat beading on his upper lip. "External consultants," Julian repeated, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "Victor, you told me you brought in a specialist team to optimize my revenue cycle. You said it was standard. You said it was how we built the nest egg for the wedding." "It is standard," Victor said. His voice was tight, clipped. "It is aggressive revenue cycle management. Everyone does it. You are overreacting." "They don't send the lead auditor from Atlanta for aggressive management," Julian shouted. "They sent him for fraud." "Julian!" Marianne swooped in then, placing her body between Julian and the truth. She was smiling, a terrified, rictus grin that looked ghastly under the crystal chandeliers. "Darling, please, you are hysterical. This is a wedding. We are celebrating love. Do not bring work into this. It is so gauche." She turned to me, her eyes narrowing into slits. "And you? You are loving this, aren't you? Dragging your boring little paperwork into the happiest day of your sister's life?" Why do you always have to make everything about money and rules? I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had signed checks for Cora's imaginary life while telling me I was a burden for needing a textbook. I did not drag this in. Mother, I said. My voice was cool, sharp, and precise. You are the one who insisted on a lavish display of wealth that you did not earn. You are the one who linked your husband's fraud to your son-in-law's medical license. I am just the person who turned on the light. I took a step closer to her. You are the best person I know at dragging things into a room, and then pretending they just fell out of the sky. Marianne recoiled, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. She wasn't used to me speaking back. She was used to the 17-year-old who cried. She didn't know how to handle the 26-year-old who kept receipts. Julian was not listening to Marianne anymore. He was vibrating with adrenaline. He turned back to Noah. I can explain, Julian said. I can show you the emails. I can show you where Victor told me to sign. I am a doctor, not an accountant. I didn't know. Ignorance is not a defense in a federal audit, Noah said simply. But cooperation is noted. Cooperation, Julian repeated. He nodded, latching onto the word like a lifeline. Yes, cooperation. I will cooperate. I will give you everything. Julian! Cora screamed from the floor. She had managed to stand up, her dress heavy and gray with dust at the hem. She looked deranged. Her hair was coming loose, and her face was blotchy with tears. Stop talking to them. They are ruining everything. Kick them out. Daddy, make them leave. Julian turned to look at his wife, but the look of adoration was gone. The look of protectiveness was gone. In its place was the cold, clinical detachment of a scientist looking at a specimen that had failed an experiment. You, Julian said. He walked toward her. He did not offer a hand. He did not offer comfort. We need to clear something up, Julian said. Right now, before I say another word to these auditors. I don't want to talk about it, Cora yelled. I want to cut the cake. Forget the cake, Julian roared. The sound echoed off the marble walls, causing the few remaining guests in the hallway to jump. There is no cake, Cora. There is no party. My career is on the line because I trusted your father, and now I need to know if I can trust you. He pointed a finger at her face. You said you went to nursing school. You said you graduated. I did, Cora lied. She lied instinctively, easily, the way she had been taught. I told you. Which school? Julian asked. It was a simple question, a fast question. The state university, Cora stammered. You know that. Which campus? Julian fired back. The main one, Cora yelled. Why does it matter? Which year did you graduate? Julian asked, stepping closer. Give me the year. Cora, give me the month. 2022, Cora shouted. May of 22. I watched from the sidelines. I knew for a fact that in May of 22, Cora had been on a 3-week vacation in Cabo San Lucas that my parents had paid for to help her find herself. Who was your clinical supervisor? Julian asked. His voice was getting lower, harder. For your senior practicum, you told me stories about the ER rotation. You told me about the trauma cases. Who signed off on your hours? Give me a name. Cora's eyes darted around the room. She looked at Marianne. Marianne looked away. She looked at Victor. Victor was busy typing furiously on his phone, likely trying to delete evidence. I don't remember, Cora screamed. It was years ago. I repress bad memories. You know that. You don't remember the name of the person who supervised you for 400 hours? Julian asked. I remember mine. Every nurse remembers theirs. It is not something you forget. Cora, I am bad with names. What is the normal range for potassium? Julian asked suddenly. What? Cora blinked. Potassium, Julian said. Basic serum electrolyte. If you are a nurse, tell me the normal range. Right now. Don't think. Just tell me. It was the most basic question in medicine. A first-year student would know it. I knew it. 3.5 to 5.0. It was burned into my brain. Cora stared at him. Her mouth worked, but no sound came out. She looked like a deer in headlights. She looked like a fraud. 10? She guessed. 10 to 20? Julian let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. 10 would be fatal. Cora, you would be dead. The patient would be dead. So I got a number wrong, Cora shrieked. I am nervous. You are attacking me. I am not attacking you, Julian said. I am diagnosing you. You are a liar. You never went to school. You never worked a day in your life. You just took the money your parents stole from my billing codes and used it to buy a fake diploma and a fake life. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. I am calling the credentialing board, Julian said, his thumb hovering over the screen. I am going to verify this right now, and then I am going to call my lawyer. No, Cora screamed. She moved faster than I thought possible. She lunged at Julian, her hands clawing not at his face, but at the device in his hand. She was not trying to hurt him. She was trying to stop the truth from traveling. She grabbed the phone. Julian, surprised by the physical attack, lost his grip. The phone skittered across the polished marble floor. Cora didn't just let it lie there. She ran to it. She lifted the heavy, layered skirt of her wedding dress, revealing white satin shoes with sharp stilettos. And then, with a primal scream of rage, she brought her heel down on the phone. Crack! She stomped on it again. Crunch! She stomped on it a third time, grinding the heel into the glass and metal, putting her entire weight behind the destruction. She looked like a mad woman. She looked like a child breaking a toy because she was losing the game. Stop it! She screamed with every stomp. Stop checking! Stop looking! Stop it! The hallway was frozen. The guests were silent. The hotel staff watched with wide eyes. Julian stared at his wife, at the woman stomping on a piece of electronics as if it were a venomous snake. He didn't try to stop her. He just watched. When Cora finally stopped, breathing heavily, her chest heaving, the phone was destroyed. It was a shattered mess of glass and plastic on the beautiful stone floor. She looked up, hair wild, eyes manic, thinking she had won, thinking that if she destroyed the device, she destroyed the problem. There, she panted. No calls, no lawyers, just us. We can fix this. We can just be a family. Julian looked at the debris, then he looked at her. Cora, he said softly. My phone backs up to the cloud every 5 minutes. And Noah, he pointed to my husband. Noah is standing right there. You didn't destroy the evidence. You just destroyed the last tiny piece of respect I had for you. He turned to me. His face was pale, but his eyes were clear. Scarlett, he said, does your team need a statement? Because I am ready to talk. I am ready to talk about everything. Cora let out a wail that sounded less like a human cry and more like a siren. But this time, nobody moved to comfort her. We all just watched the princess burn down her own castle. The hallway of the hotel had transformed from a scene of celebration into a crime scene. Although the only blood on the floor was metaphorical, the wedding planner, a woman with a headset and a desperate smile plastered onto her face, was trying to herd the lingering guests back into the ballroom. She kept clapping her hands softly, urging people to return to their seats for the salad course. But nobody was moving. The rumors were already spreading through the crowd like smoke in a ventilation system. I could hear snippets of it as the guests whispered behind their hands. They were saying the groom was leaving. They were saying the police were coming. They were saying Cora was not who she said she was. Cora was currently being helped up by a bridesmaid who looked terrified to be touching her. My sister was not screaming anymore. She was in a state of shock, staring at the crushed remains of Julian's phone on the marble floor as if she could not quite understand how it had gotten there. Julian turned his back on her. He walked over to me, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. He looked 10 years older than he had when he walked down the aisle an hour ago. He gestured toward a small alcove near the elevators, away from the prying eyes of the senator and the other high-profile guests. Scarlett, he said. His voice was hoarse. Please, just for a second. I looked at Noah. He gave a small nod, signaling that he would stay close, right within arm's reach, but he would let me handle this. We walked into the alcove. The air here was cooler, away from the body heat of the crowd. Julian leaned against the wall, sliding down slightly until he caught himself. He looked at me with eyes that were red-rimmed and pleading. "I need you to be honest with me," he said. "I know your parents are liars. I know Cora is complicated, but I need to know the baseline. I need to know what I am actually dealing with." He took a breath that sounded like a rattle in his chest. "Did she go to school?" he asked. "Did she actually attend the university? Even for a semester? Did she do anything?" I looked at the man my sister had married. Part of me wanted to destroy him. Part of me wanted to laugh and tell him that he deserved this for not doing his due diligence, but looking at his face, I realized he was just another victim. He was wealthier than I was, and he had more power. But he had fallen into the exact same trap. He had believed the Ross family myth because it was so shiny, so perfect, so confident. "Julian," I said carefully, "I left home when I was 18. I have not seen Cora's transcripts. I have not seen her daily schedule for 9 years. That is not an answer," he pressed. "You know them. You know how they operate." "I know this," I said, choosing my words with the precision of a surgeon. "My family is exceptional at one thing. They are very good at creating a version of the truth that is easy to sell. If Cora told you she went to nursing school, it is because she knew that was the story you wanted to buy. Whether she sat in a classroom or not was irrelevant to them. The only thing that mattered was the result." "So it is a lie," Julian whispered. He closed his eyes. "It is all a lie. The degree, the background, the shared interest in medicine. She just mirrored me." "She mirrored the person she thought you wanted," I corrected. "And my parents funded the production costs." Before Julian could respond, Noah stepped into the alcove. His phone was pressed to his ear, and his expression was grim. He held up a hand, signaling for silence, and listened for another 10 seconds. "Understood," Noah said into the phone. "Send the secure link to my device. I will review it immediately." He ended the call and looked at Julian. "That was the Atlanta office," Noah said. His voice was devoid of emotion. Pure business. "The system just finished a batch update on the Brightwater audit. They ran a cross-reference on all external contractor IDs linked to the billing anomalies." Julian straightened up. "And? Your name is flagged." "Julian," Noah said. "But it is not just flagged for review, it is flagged for pattern matching. The billing codes submitted under your provider number match the exact algorithmic structure of 3 other shell companies we are investigating. Same timestamps, same invoice formatting, same IP address routing." Julian looked like he might vomit. "I didn't generate those invoices," he said, his voice trembling. "I swear to you, Victor handles the administrative side. He said he was optimizing the workflow." "The audit does not care who clicked the button," Noah said. "It cares whose name is on the license. As of 5 minutes ago, your provider ID is listed as high risk in the Ravenwood database. That triggers an automatic freeze on all federal reimbursements." I felt a chill go down my spine. This was not just a family drama anymore. This was not just about a lied-about degree or a ruined wedding. This was federal fraud. This was prison time. My parents had not just used Julian for his status. They had turned him into a mule for their financial crimes. Scarlett, the girl who was kicked out, was safe. Julian, the golden boy who was welcomed in, was ruined. "I have to go," Julian said, pushing off the wall. "I have to get my laptop. I have to lock Victor out of the accounts." He rushed back toward the chaos of the hallway, leaving Noah and me alone in the alcove. I watched him go, feeling a strange mixture of pity and detachment. I was about to tell Noah that we should leave, that we had done enough, when my own phone vibrated in my clutch. It was a sharp, persistent buzz. I pulled it out. It was a notification from my bank. "Security alert. Identity verification requested for loan modification." I frowned. I was not modifying any loans. We had a mortgage, and we had paid off my student loans 2 years ago. We were debt-free aside from the house. I unlocked the phone. The alert was not from my primary bank. It was from a credit monitoring service I had signed up for years ago and largely ignored because my credit was frozen. Activity detected on closed account ending in 4491. I stared at the number. 4491. I did not recognize it. "What is it?" Noah asked, noticing the change in my demeanor. "I don't know," I said. "I am getting a weird alert. Someone is trying to access a loan file." "Probably the system-wide sweep," Noah said. "If the audit is looking at Cora and Victor, they might be pinging anything connected to the family social security numbers. It happens." "No," I said, tapping the screen to open the full report. "This is specific. It says a verification code was sent to the phone number on file ending in 7720. I stopped breathing. 7720. That was my mother's old cell phone number, the one she had when I was in high school. "Noah," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Why is my mother's phone number listed on a loan file under my name?" I logged into the Credit Bureau app. I had to reset the password because I hadn't used it in so long. My fingers were shaking as I typed. The dashboard loaded. It showed my credit score, 810. Excellent. I scrolled down to History. There it was. Department of Education. Servicer Great Lakes. Status, paid in full/consolidated. Origination date, August 26th, 2017. I froze. August 26th, 2017. That was the week before I moved out. That was the week before my parents sat me down and told me I had to be independent. That was the week they bought Cora the car. I clicked on the details. Principal amount, $20,000. Borrower, Scarlett Ross. Cosigner, none. My head started to spin. I grabbed Noah's arm to steady myself. "Noah," I said, "look at this." He leaned in, squinting at the small screen. He read the lines. He looked at the date. He looked at the amount. "You took out a student loan in 2017? Noah asked. "I thought you paid for community college out of pocket." "I did," I said. "I paid cash. Every semester. I worked double shifts. I didn't take out a loan until I transferred to the university 2 years later. And that loan was for $6,000. This is $20,000. "But it says paid in full," Noah pointed out. "I didn't pay it," I said. "I never saw this money. I never attended a school in 2017 that cost $20,000. I scrolled further down. The payment history was erratic. Late payments, interest capitalization, and then a lump sum payment 3 years ago. "Who paid it?" Noah asked, and then it hit me. The date of the payoff. It matched the date Cora graduated from her fake program. It matched the timeline of when Victor started consulting for Julian's practice. My mind flashed back to the kitchen, the granite island, the rain. I was 18. I was packing my things, getting ready for the life of independence they had forced on me. Victor had come into the kitchen with a stack of papers. "Just some formalities," he had said, tossing a pen onto the counter. "Since you are going to be an adult, we need to separate your liability from the household. Insurance waivers, tax release forms. Just sign them so we don't get billed if you break a leg at that diner job of yours." I had signed them. I had signed them quickly, angrily, wanting to get it over with so I could leave. I didn't read the fine print. I trusted that even though they were cold, they were still my parents. I didn't think they would commit a felony against their own daughter. "They made me sign a master promissory note," I whispered. The realization felt like a physical blow to the stomach. "They took out a student loan in my name. They used my acceptance letter, the one they told me to throw away. To validate the application, they took $20,000 from the government in my name. And they kept the money." Noah finished the thought. His face had gone hard, the auditor in him taking over. "They used the loan meant for your education to fund Cora's first year, or the car, or the renovation. And then they kicked me out," I said. tears stung my eyes, not from sadness, but from a rage so pure it felt like fire. They kicked me out and told me to be independent. They told me I was a burden, but they had already cashed a check for $20,000 using my credit. And now, Noah said, scrolling through the report on my phone, Cora is in trouble. Julian is looking into her history. So someone, probably Victor, is trying to access this old file. Maybe to scrub it, maybe to hide the paper trail that links the payoff to his account. The independent mistake, I said, repeating my mother's words from the hallway. They hadn't just abandoned me. That would have been cruel, but simple. No, they had monetized me. They had harvested my credit score before I even knew what a credit score was. They had shackled me with debt I didn't know existed, and then they had the audacity to mock me for being poor while they spent the money they stole from my future. I looked up from the phone, across the hallway, through the crowd of confused guests. I saw Victor. He was standing near the elevators, furiously typing on his phone. He wasn't deleting emails. He was trying to log into my student loan servicer account. He was trying to cover his tracks. He stole from me, I said. My voice was steady now. The fire had settled into a cold, hard knot in my chest. He stole $20,000 from an 18-year-old girl who was working for minimum wage. Yes, Noah said. He did, and that is wire fraud. That is identity theft. And since it involves federal student aid, that is a federal crime. Noah took the phone from my hand. He took a screenshot of the loan details. He took a screenshot of the login attempt from my mother's old number. We have the evidence, Noah said. What do you want to do? I looked at Victor. I looked at Marianne, who was now dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief, playing the victim for a group of elderly aunts. I remembered the nights I sat in my car, counting quarters to buy a sandwich. I remembered the panic attacks when I thought I wouldn't make rent. I remembered the shame I felt for years, thinking I was just not good enough, not smart enough, not worthy of their help. And all that time, they were eating dinner on plates bought with my name. I don't want to leave anymore, I said. I smoothed the silk of my dress. I wiped the single tear from my cheek. I want to talk to my father, I said, and I want everyone to hear it. Are you sure? Noah asked. We can handle this through the legal department on Monday. You don't have to do this here. Monday is for the lawyers, I said. Today is for the daughter. I stepped out of the alcove. I walked past the shattered phone. I walked past the weeping bride. I walked straight toward the man who had taught me the value of independence, and for the first time in my life, I was going to send him the bill. The sun came up over Charleston with an aggressive brightness that felt like an insult. After the chaos of the night before, logic dictated that the wedding should have been canceled, the guests sent home, and the lawyers summoned. But the Ross family did not operate on logic. They operated on optics. At 8 a.m, a knock sounded on the door of our hotel room. I was already awake, sitting in the armchair by the window, watching the boats drift lazily on the river. Noah was still asleep, exhausted from hours of coordinating with the Atlanta office on his encrypted laptop. I opened the door to find Marianne standing there. She was fully dressed in a pastel yellow linen suit, her hair sprayed into a helmet of perfection, her face painted with a layer of foundation thick enough to hide the stress fractures of her life. She did not look like a mother who had been exposed as a fraud. She looked like a CEO handling a PR crisis. We are doing a brunch, she said without preamble. In the garden courtyard, the photographer is still contracted until noon, and we need to get the family portraits done, the ones without the incident. You want to take pictures? I asked, keeping my voice low so as not to wake Noah. Your son-in-law knows you committed federal wire fraud, and you want to smile for the camera? Julian is calming down, Marianne lied. I could tell she was lying because she smoothed the front of her jacket, a nervous tic she had since I was a child. Victor is talking to him. It is all a misunderstanding. We just need to show a united front. If the guests see us fighting, the rumors solidify. If they see us eating quiche and laughing, the rumors die. That is how the world works. Scarlett? She looked at me with cold, hard eyes. You are coming down, she commanded. You owe your sister that much after the scene you caused last night. Just sit there, smile, and keep your mouth shut. Can you do that? Or are you going to be difficult again? I looked at her. I thought about the $20,000. I thought about the signature on the master promissory note. I thought about the years I spent eating instant noodles while she spent my credit on throw pillows. I will come down, I said. Marianne exhaled, her shoulders dropping an inch. Good. Wear something brighter. That navy dress was depressing. I will come down, I repeated, cutting her off. On 2 conditions. 1, Noah comes with me. 2, you treat us with absolute respect. If you make one snide comment, if you roll your eyes once, I will finish the conversation we started in the hallway. Marianne pursed her lips. She wanted to snap at me. She wanted to tell me I was ungrateful. But she looked at the resolve in my eyes, and she realized the power dynamic had shifted. She was not the landlord anymore. She was the tenant, and I held the eviction notice. Fine, she said tightly. Half an hour. Don't be late. When we arrived at the garden courtyard 30 minutes later, the scene was surreal. It was a beautiful setup. White tablecloths, crystal flutes of mimosa, and the smell of blooming magnolias. About 40 guests, mostly close family and the wedding party, were milling about. They were trying very hard to act normal, but the tension was so thick it felt like humidity. Cora was there, wearing a white sundress and oversized sunglasses to hide her swollen eyes. She was sitting at a table with 2 of her bridesmaids, staring at a plate of fruit as if it were radioactive. Victor was standing near the buffet, laughing too loudly at a joke made by Uncle Robert. When we walked in, the conversation dipped for a fraction of a second before resuming. Marianne rushed over, her smile fixed and terrifying. Here they are, she announced, grabbing my arm with a grip that was painful. Scarlett and Noah, so glad you could join us before you head back to the city. She steered us toward a table near the center. Right next to where Aunt Linda and Cousin Beth were sitting, Aunt Linda was the family historian, the one who knew everyone's business and broadcast it to the tri-state area. This was calculated. Marianne wanted witnesses to our reconciliation. We were just talking about you, Scarlett, Aunt Linda said, looking at me with that pitying expression people reserve for the black sheep. Your mother was saying how proud she is that you have managed to build a life for yourself, despite, well, you know, the rocky start. I sat down. Noah took the seat next to me, his posture alert, his eyes scanning the perimeter like a bodyguard. Is that what she said? I asked, unfolding my napkin. Oh, yes, Marianne chimed in, pouring me a glass of orange juice. I was just telling Linda that we always knew Scarlett needed a push. Some birds need to be shoved out of the nest to fly. It was hard for us. Of course, Victor and I cried for weeks when she left, but we knew we had to be tough. We wanted her to be independent. There was that word again, independent. She said it with such virtue. She said it like she was Mother Teresa, sacrificing her own happiness to teach me a valuable lesson about self-reliance. I looked at Victor across the courtyard. He caught my eye and raised his glass in a mock salute, thinking he had won, thinking I would play along to avoid a scene. I felt the anger rise in my chest. But it was not the hot, chaotic anger of a teenager. It was the cold, mathematical anger of an auditor. Independent, I said, testing the word. That is an interesting way to put it. Well, it worked, Aunt Linda chirped. Look at you, married, working. You did it all on your own. That is true, I said, my voice carrying clearly over the clinking of silverware. I did do it on my own, which is why I am confused about something. Marianne froze. The pitcher of juice in her hand hovered over the glass. Scarlett, she warned, her voice a low hiss. Eat your fruit. I ignored her. I turned to Aunt Linda, but I spoke loud enough for the table behind us to hear, loud enough for Victor to hear. Mother says she wanted me to be independent, I said pleasantly. She says they cut me off so I would learn the value of $1. So, I am just wondering, if the goal was independence, why was there a student loan taken out in my name the week before I was kicked out? The fork halfway to Aunt Linda's mouth stopped. I beg your pardon? A loan, I said, clarifying. For $20,000, taken out in August of 2017, my credit report shows it was opened with my social security number, but the contact number listed was Mother's cell phone, and the funds were dispersed to a bank account that I have never accessed. Marianne slammed the pitcher down on the table. Juice sloshed onto the white linen, creating a jagged yellow stain. That is enough, she snapped. You are confused. You are remembering things wrong. You always do this. I have the report on my phone, I said, reaching into my purse. And I have the audit log showing someone tried to access the file last night to delete it. Was that you, Mother, or was it Victor? The silence in the courtyard was absolute. The birds might have been singing, but I could not hear them. All I could hear was the collective intake of breath from the relatives who had spent years listening to Marianne talk about her ungrateful daughter. Victor was moving before I finished the sentence. He crossed the courtyard in 3 long strides, his face a mask of fury that he was barely containing. "Scarlett," he said, his voice booming. "A word. Now." He did not wait for me to agree. He grabbed my elbow, his fingers digging into the tender flesh, and hauled me up from the chair. Noah stood up instantly, stepping forward, but I put a hand on his chest. "It is okay," I said to Noah. "I want to hear this." Victor dragged me away from the table, pulling me toward a secluded archway covered in ivy, out of direct earshot of the guests but still visible. He spun me around, backing me into the stone wall. "What do you think you are doing?" he hissed. His face was inches from mine. I could smell the coffee on his breath and the fear sweating out of his pores. "Are you trying to destroy us? Is that it? You want to burn the house down because you didn't get a pony when you were 12? "I want the truth," I said, pulling my arm out of his grip. "You stole my identity. Victor, you forged my signature." "I did what I had to do," he whispered furiously. "We were liquidating assets to buy the new property. Cash flow was tight. It was a bridge loan. I paid it back. You didn't pay a dime. It didn't hurt you." "It was in my name," I said, my voice rising. "You risked my future to buy a house flip? You sent me out into the world with nothing, while you were sitting on $20,000 of federal aid that belonged to me?" "It is complicated," Victor argued. "You don't understand finance. We provided for you for 18 years. That money was reimbursement for raising you." I stared at him. The audacity was breathtaking. "Reimbursement," I repeated. "You think children are investments that pay dividends?" "Listen to me," Victor growled. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a menacing octave. "You are going to go back to that table. You are going to tell Linda you were mistaken. You are going to smile. Because if you keep pushing this, Scarlett, if you trigger an investigation, the assets get frozen, the accounts get locked. Cora loses her house. Your mother loses her club memberships. We lose everything. Do you understand? You open your mouth, and you bankrupt this family." He thought that would scare me. He thought the threat of losing the family status would make me heal, because in his world, status was the only thing that mattered. I looked him in the eye. I stood up straighter, realizing that the man I had feared for so long was just a small, greedy grifter in an expensive suit. "You say you will lose everything," I said softly. I stepped closer to him. "But you are not losing it because of me. Dad, you are losing it because you stole it." "Don't get smart with me," he warned. "Lose everything," I said again, tasting the words. "Or be exposed? Because there is a difference. Losing everything implies bad luck. Being exposed implies justice. Which one are you really afraid of?" Victor raised his hand. For a split second, I thought he was going to hit me. "Don't," a voice said from behind him. It wasn't Noah. It was Julian. Victor froze. He slowly lowered his hand and turned around. Julian was standing at the entrance to the archway. He was still wearing the clothes he had on the night before, a wrinkled dress shirt with the collar unbuttoned and no tie. He looked like he hadn't slept in a week. His eyes were dark hollows, and his skin was pale, but there was a clarity in his expression that had been missing yesterday. "Julian," Victor said, his voice instantly switching to a jovial, reassuring tone. "My boy. Good morning. We were just having a father-daughter chat, clearing the air." "I heard you," Julian said. He didn't look at Victor. He looked at me. "I heard what she said about the loan. Is it true?" "It is a misunderstanding," Victor said quickly. "Paperwork error." "Is it true?" Julian asked me again. "Yes," I said. "They took out a student loan in my name and kept the money." Julian nodded slowly. He finally looked at Victor. "You stole from your own child." Julian said, "Just like you stole from my practice." "I optimized your practice," Victor snapped, losing patience. "I made you money." "You made me a co-conspirator," Julian shouted. The shout drew attention. Cora, who had been sulking at her table, stood up and ran over, sensing that the tide was turning against them. "Julian," she cried, "stop it. Why are you listening to them? They are just jealous. Scarlett is making things up to hurt me." Julian turned to his wife. He looked at her with a profound sadness. "I asked you a question last night," Julian said, "about the nursing school. You lied. I asked you about the clinicals. You lied. So now I'm going to ask you one more time. And if you lie to me now, Cora, I am walking out that gate, and I am never coming back." Cora trembled. She looked at her mother, who was watching from the table. Paralyzed, she looked at her father, who was cornered. "What?" she whispered. "Did you know?" Julian asked. "Did you know they took out a loan in Scarlett's name? Did you know where the money for your car came from?" Cora stammered. "I don't know about finances. Daddy handles that." "Don't put this on him," Julian said. "You and your mother talk about everything. You mock Scarlett for being poor. You laughed about her working at a diner. Did you know she was paying back a debt that you spent?" "It wasn't a debt," Cora yelled, her face flushing red. "It was just a signature. Daddy said it was free money. He said Scarlett wasn't using her credit anyway because she was too young." The confession hung in the air. "Free money," Julian repeated. "I only borrowed her name once," Cora screamed, stomping her foot, tears streaming down her face. "I only did it one time, for the car. It wasn't a big deal. She wasn't even living here anymore. Why does it matter?" The silence that followed was different than the one at the table. This wasn't the silence of shock. This was the silence of understanding. I looked at my sister. I looked at her twisted, entitled face, and suddenly, the final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I had always thought Cora was just spoiled. I thought she was a brat who had been given too much. But looking at her now, defending identity theft as if she had just borrowed a sweater without asking, I realized it was much worse. She wasn't just a beneficiary of their corruption. She was a student of it. Marianne and Victor hadn't just raised a princess. They had raised an accomplice. They had taught her that other people, especially me, were not human beings with rights. We were resources. We were livestock, to be harvested when the real family needed something. "You borrowed her name," Julian said, his voice flat, like it was a cup of sugar. "We are family," Cora wailed. "What is hers is ours." "No," Julian said. He stepped back, looking at the three of them. Victor, the architect, Marianne, the enabler, and Cora, the product. "No, that is not how family works. That is how a crime syndicate works." He turned to me. "Scarlett," he said, "I am done. I am going to the authorities. I am going to report the billing fraud, and I will testify to what I just heard about the loan." "You can't." Victor lunged forward, grabbing Julian's shirt. "You are implicated too, you idiot. You signed the charts. You go down with us." Julian shoved Victor back, It wasn't a graceful shove, it was a desperate, hard push that sent my father stumbling into the ivy-covered wall. "I would rather go to jail for being stupid," Julian said, straightening his shirt, "than stay married to this." He looked at Cora one last time. "I am annulling the marriage," he said. "On the grounds of fraud. Do not contact me." Julian turned and walked away. He walked past the stunned guests, past the spilled orange juice, and out of the courtyard gate. Cora stood there for a second, processing it. Then she let out a scream that shattered the morning. "Scarlett!" she shrieked, turning on me, her eyes wild with hate. "You did this. You ruined my life. You jealous, hateful bitch!" She charged at me, but she didn't get far. Noah stepped in front of me, a solid wall of calm, and from the other side, Aunt Linda, the gossip, the watcher, stood up. "Sit down, Cora," Aunt Linda said, her voice sharp. "You have done enough," for the first time in her life. Cora looked around and saw that no one was on her side. The guests were not looking at her with adoration. They were looking at her with disgust. The photo shoot was definitely over. The adrenaline that had fueled me in the courtyard began to ebb away, leaving behind a cold, hollow ache in my bones. We had retreated back to our hotel room, a sanctuary of neutral beige tones and heavy curtains that blocked out the mid-morning sun. I sat on the edge of the bed, my hands folded in my lap, staring at a generic watercolor painting of a sailboat on the opposite wall. Noah was standing by the desk, loosening his tie. He had been on the phone with the legal department at Ravenwood for the last 20 minutes, speaking in the clipped, precise code of corporate compliance. When he finally hung up, the silence in the room felt heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. He walked over and sat beside me. He didn't touch me immediately. He just let his presence settle around me, a solid anchor in a world that felt like it was dissolving into liquid chaos. "You have them," Noah said quietly. "With the loan documents, the witness testimony from Julian, and the audit trail. You have enough to bury them. You could file police reports. You could sue for damages. You could go to the press. You could make sure they never show their faces in Charleston society again." He turned to look at me, his eyes searching mine. "But the question is not what you can do, Scarlett. It is what you want to do. Do you want revenge?" I looked at the sailboat on the wall. I thought about the way Cora had looked at me, with pure, unadulterated hatred. I thought about Victor's threats. I thought about Marianne's desperate attempts to spin the narrative even as the walls were crumbling. "Revenge implies I want to hurt them back," I said slowly. "It implies that I want to inflict the same pain on them that they inflicted on me. But I don't." I took a deep breath. "I don't want to hurt them. Noah, I just want them to stop. I want them to stop lying about me. I want them to stop using my name to fund their lifestyle. I want them to stop rewriting my history to make themselves look like saints and me like a monster. I don't want revenge. I want to take the pen out of their hands so they can never write my story again." Noah nodded. "Then we need to build a wall made of evidence." I stood up and walked over to my bag. I pulled out my laptop, my personal one, not the work machine. I sat down at the small desk and opened it. My fingers hovered over the trackpad. There was a folder buried deep in my hard drive. It was labeled simply Archives. Inside, there was a subfolder titled 2017. I hadn't opened it in 9 years. I hadn't wanted to. It was a digital graveyard of the girl I used to be. "What is that?" Noah asked, coming to stand behind me. "Insurance," I said. "I told you I recorded them, back when I was 17, when they started charging me for rent, when they told me I couldn't go to college." I clicked on the folder. A list of audio files appeared, dated by month and year. I clicked on one dated April 12th, 2017. The audio crackled for a second. And then, my father's voice filled the hotel room. It was younger, stronger, but undeniably him. "You are dreaming if you think we are paying for that school. Don't dream of college. Scarlett, people like you. You are not built for academia. You are built for work. You are a worker bee? Accept it. I felt Noah's hand on my shoulder, squeezing tight. I clicked on another file. May 3rd. Marianne's voice, high-pitched, complaining. She is such a burden. Victor, I look at her and I just see bills. She eats our food, uses our water, and walks around with that sour face. Why can't she be more like Cora? Cora brings light into the room. Scarlett just brings... Wait. Hearing it again, after all these years, was like touching a hot stove. It burned. But it also clarified. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined their cruelty. It was real, and it was documented. I am not going to post these on social media, I said, my voice steady. That is what they would do. They would try to win the court of public opinion. I don't care about their friends or their club members. I opened my email client and drafted a new message. The recipient was the General Counsel for Ravenwood Compliance Labs, copied to the HR director. I am sending these to your legal team, I told Noah. As context? Context for what? For the smear campaign that is about to start, I said. My mother called me mentally unstable in the hallway. She told guests I have a condition. They are going to try to discredit the messenger. If I am the one flagging the audit fraud, they will say I am doing it out of spite, out of madness. I need the firm to know that this is a documented pattern of abuse. I need them to hear the voices of the people who are about to claim I am lying. I attached the files. I hit send. It wasn't a viral moment. It was a sterile corporate transaction. But as the progress bar hit 100%, I felt a weight lift off my chest. I wasn't hiding anymore. I was inoculating myself against their poison. A knock at the door made us both jump. Noah moved instantly. Placing himself between me and the entrance, he checked the peephole. It is Julian, he said. I frowned. Let him in. Julian looked worse than he had in the courtyard. He was still wearing his dress shirt, but it was unbuttoned halfway down his chest, and he was sweating. He paced into the room, running his hands through his hair. I can't go back down there, he said. I can't face them. Victor is in the lobby trying to bribe the hotel manager to delete security footage. Marianne is telling everyone I had a panic attack due to pre-wedding stress. They are spinning it. Scarlett, they are spinning it so fast I can't breathe. He looked at me, his eyes wide and terrified. Brightwater, he whispered. The audit. Noah said they flagged my ID. They did, Noah said from the corner. It is a provisional flag. It means they stop paying you until you explain the discrepancy. I can't explain it, Julian cried, because I didn't generate the bills. But if this becomes a scandal, if this wedding blows up and people start digging, Brightwater will expedite the review. They will fire me before the investigation is even done just to save face. He looked at me, imploring. You work there. You know how they operate. If I become a liability, I am dead. I looked at him. I saw a man who had built his entire life on the approval of others, just like my sister. He had married into the Ross family because they looked good on paper, because they made him feel important, and now the gloss was peeling off, revealing the rot underneath. You want advice? I asked. Yes, Julian said. Please. Stop trying to save the wedding, I said, and start trying to save your license. You are worried about a scandal? Julian, you are married to a woman who committed identity theft against her own sister. You are in business with a man who used your medical credentials to launder money. The scandal is already here. The only question is whether you are a victim or a co-conspirator. I am a victim, he insisted. Then act like one, I said sharply. Stop hiding in my hotel room. Go to the police. Go to the medical board. Report the fraud yourself before Ravenwood does it for you. If you wait for us to find the proof, you go to jail. If you bring the proof to us, you might just lose your job. Julian stared at me. He looked sick. But, Cora, he whispered, I loved her. Did you? I asked. Or did you love the version of her that pretended to be a nurse? Did you love the girl who mirrored everything you said? Because that girl doesn't exist. Julian, that was a performance, and the curtain just came down. Don't marry someone who lives on lies, I added, my voice softer but firm. It is like building a house on a sinkhole. Eventually, the ground opens up. Julian nodded slowly. He looked at Noah, then at me. He didn't say goodbye. He just turned and walked out the door. His steps heavy, a man marching toward his own demolition. I thought that was the end of it. I thought we could pack our bags and leave. But 10 minutes later, the phone in the room rang. I ignored it. Then my cell phone rang. I ignored that too. Then, a soft, tentative knock on the door. Not the aggressive pounding of my father, or the frantic pacing of Julian. I knew who it was before I opened it. I opened the door 3 inches. Cora stood there. She looked small, without the grand wedding dress, stripped of the entourage of bridesmaids. She looked like the child she used to be, the child who would sneak into my room and break my things, then cry until my mother blamed me for leaving them out. "Scarlett," she said. Her voice was trembling. "Can I come in?" "No," I said. She flinched. Tears welled up in her eyes. Big, beautiful, cinematic tears. "Please," she sniffled. "I have nowhere else to go. Julian locked me out of the suite. Mom and Dad are screaming at each other in the lobby. Everyone is looking at me. I need my big sister." It was a low blow, a weaponized nostalgia designed to pierce my armor. "You don't have a big sister," I said. "You have an independent mistake. Remember?" "I didn't mean that," Cora cried, pressing her hand against the doorframe. I was jealous, okay? I admit it. You were always the smart one. You were the strong one. I felt like I had to compete, and Mom said if I just acted like I was successful, I would become successful. I didn't mean to hurt you." She looked up at me, her lower lip trembling. "Help me, Scarlett, please. Julian is going to leave me. The police might come. I don't know what to do. Fix it. You always fix things. Just tell Julian you lied. Tell him you made a mistake about the loan. Please, I will do anything. I will pay you back." I looked at her. I looked at the desperation in her eyes. And for a second, I felt the old instinct, the instinct to protect her, the instinct to take the blame so the house would be quiet. It was a deep, conditioned groove in my brain. But then I remembered the loan. I remembered the interest capitalizing while I worked double shifts. I remembered her stomping on Julian's phone to destroy the evidence. "I cannot fix this, Cora," I said, "because I didn't break it." "But you can save me," she pleaded. "Just this once. Help me." "I did help you," I said calmly. Cora blinked, confused. "What?" "For 9 years," I said. "I helped you by disappearing. I removed myself from the equation so you could be the only child. I let you have all the money, all the attention, all the love. I gave you the entire stage. Cora, I let you shine without any competition." I leaned closer to the gap in the door. "And look what you did with it," I whispered. "You didn't shine. You just burned everything down. I didn't ruin your life. Cora, I just stopped holding the roof up." "You are a monster," she spat, the mask of the victim slipping instantly to reveal the rage underneath. "You are selfish. You want me to die." "I want you to grow up," I said. "And unfortunately for you, growing up is expensive." I closed the door in her face. I locked the deadbolt. I heard her scream my name once, a raw, frustrated sound, and then silence. I turned back to the room, shaking slightly. It was done. I had cut the last cord. Noah was looking at his phone. He wasn't looking at me. His face was pale, his jaw set hard. "Scarlett," he said, "we need to leave. Now." "Why?" I asked. "What happened?" "I just got an alert from the corporate security system," Noah said. He held up the phone so I could see the screen. It was a transcript of a call coming into the Ravenwood main switchboard in Atlanta. Caller ID, Victor Ross. Recipient, Human Resources/Ethics Hotline. Subject, Urgent report regarding employee S. Ross and N. Bennett. They are calling my job, Noah said, his voice deadly calm. Your father is on the line with the ethics officer. He is claiming that you are suffering from a paranoid psychotic episode and that I am abusing my access to company data to harass your family for personal extortion. I felt the blood drain from my face. They are trying to get us fired, I said. They are trying to kill the audit by discrediting the auditors. They are going for the nuclear option, Noah said, grabbing his laptop bag. They know if they can paint you as crazy and me as unethical, the evidence becomes fruit of the poisonous tree. They are trying to destroy our credibility before the investigation starts. I grabbed my purse. The protection phase was over. My parents hadn't taken the hint. They hadn't taken the exit ramp. I sent the audio files just in time, I said, my mind racing. Yes, Noah said, opening the door and checking the hallway. But audio files are history. This is active warfare. If they want to question our ethics, Scarlett, let's give them a reason to. What do we do? I asked as we hurried down the corridor toward the service elevator, avoiding the main lobby. We don't go home, Noah said. We go to the regional field office, we meet the general counsel in person, and we bring the full unredacted file on the Ross Family Trust. I stepped into the elevator. My mother's words echoed in my head. Independent mistake. They want to talk to my manager? I said, watching the doors close. Fine, let's introduce them. The conference room at the Ravenwood Regional Office was a masterpiece of intimidation by design. It was a glass box suspended on the 14th floor, overlooking the Atlanta skyline, with air conditioning that was set permanently to a temperature that discouraged casual conversation. There were no soft edges here. The table was a slab of gray slate. The chairs were ergonomic mesh that forced you to sit upright, and the lighting was clinical. It was the perfect place for a murder, or at least, the murder of a family delusion. I sat at the head of the table. To my right sat Linda Vance, the Director of Human Resources for the Southeast Division. She was a woman who smiled only when she was firing someone, and today, she was not smiling. She had a notepad open in front of her and a digital recorder placed precisely in the center of the slate table. Noah was not in the room. This was a calculated decision. If Noah were here, my parents would focus on him. They would blame the corrupt husband for poisoning their daughter's mind. By facing them alone, with only a corporate witness, I was forcing them to look at me. I was forcing them to acknowledge that the 18-year-old girl they had discarded was now the woman holding the gavel. The door opened at exactly 10 o'clock. Victor walked in first. He was wearing his boardroom armor, a navy pinstripe suit, a red power tie, and a watch that cost more than my first car. He carried a leather portfolio under his arm and walked with the brisk, annoyed energy of a CEO who has been called into a meeting that could have been an email. Marianne followed him. She had abandoned the pastel yellows of the garden brunch. She was wearing black, a dramatic, mournful silk ensemble that suggested she was attending a funeral for her own dignity. She had a handkerchief clutched in her hand, ready to be deployed at the first sign of resistance. They stopped when they saw Linda Vance. Victor's step faltered. He had expected a family shouting match. He had expected Scarlett the daughter, crying and emotional. He had not expected Scarlett the senior analyst, flanked by an HR executive who looked like she ate lawsuits for breakfast. "What is this?" Victor asked, gesturing to the room with his portfolio. "We agreed to meet to settle this family dispute." "Why is there a third party?" "This is not a family dispute," I said, my voice calm and amplified slightly by the room's acoustics. "You called the Ravenwood Ethics Hotline this morning. You made formal allegations of misconduct against 2 employees. That makes this a corporate investigation. Ms. Vance is here to document your statement." Victor's jaw tightened. He realized, too late, that he had overplayed his hand. He had tried to use the corporate machine to crush me, but he had forgotten that I knew how to drive the machine better than he did. "Please, have a seat," Linda Vance said. Her voice was pleasant but devoid of warmth. Mr. and Mrs. Ross, we take allegations of extortion and harassment very seriously. Since you are the accusing party, we are giving you the floor. Marianne sat down, pulling her chair close to Victor's. She looked at me with wet, shimmering eyes. Scarlett, she said, her voice trembling with a practiced vibrato, we don't want to do this. We don't want to get you in trouble. We just want you to stop this madness. Julian is threatening an annulment. Cora is hysterical. We just want you to issue a statement saying you were mistaken about the loan. Just a little misunderstanding. That is all. A statement, I repeated. Yes, Victor said, regaining his footing. He opened his portfolio and slid a piece of paper across the slate table. I took the liberty of drafting it for you. It says that due to the stress of the wedding and unresolved childhood issues, you misremembered the financial details of your departure from our home. It says that the Ross Family Trust has always operated with full transparency. You sign this, we call Julian, we save the marriage, and we drop the ethics complaint. Everyone walks away clean. I looked at the paper. It was written in legal jargon, absolving them of all liability and painting me as a mentally fragile woman who had suffered a breakdown. So, I said, looking up, you want me to commit perjury to save your reputation. It is not perjury, Victor snapped. It is a correction of the record. You were 18. Scarlett, you were emotional. You didn't understand how finance worked. You probably signed papers you didn't read and got confused. I did sign papers I didn't read, I agreed. Victor smiled. It was a shark's smile. Exactly. See? We are making progress. I reached into my own folder. I pulled out a single sheet of paper. It was a high-resolution photocopy of the master promissory note from 2017. I slid it across the table, right on top of his drafted apology. I signed this, I said, on August 26, 2017, 3 days before you told me I had to leave. Victor looked at the document. He didn't touch it. I highlighted a few interesting fields, I said, pointing to the neon yellow lines. Field 4, borrower's address. It lists 249 Oakwood Drive, your house. The house I was kicked out of. So, Marianne sniffed, it was your permanent address at the time. Field 9, I continued. Refund preference. It indicates that any excess loan funds, money not used for tuition, should be deposited into the account ending in 4491. I looked at my mother. That is the joint checking account you used for the kitchen renovation, isn't it? Marianne went pale. She clutched her handkerchief tighter. And finally, I said, tapping the bottom of the page, the signature date, August 26th, but the school certification date, the date the university confirmed I was enrolled, is September 2nd. I was already gone by September 2nd. Victor, I was living in a motel room. I never attended a single class. So how did the university certify my enrollment? I leaned forward. Unless someone called the registrar, I said softly. Someone pretending to be me, or someone with power of attorney. Victor scoffed. He waved his hand dismissively, though I noticed a tremor in his fingers. This is ridiculous, he said. It is a paperwork error. The registrar made a mistake. The bank made a mistake. You are trying to build a conspiracy out of clerical incompetence. You cannot prove we did anything malicious. Proof, Linda Vance interjected softly, is a requirement for the ethics complaint you filed. Mr. Ross, you claimed your daughter is lying. She is presenting federal documents that suggest she is telling the truth. She is lying about the context, Victor shouted, slamming his hand on the slate. The sound echoed violently. She signed that loan willingly. She wanted the money. She probably spent it on drugs or rent. And now she is trying to blame us. I spent it? I asked. The audit trail shows the disbursement went directly to your contractor. Victor, did I hire a contractor to remodel your kitchen while I was sleeping in my car? You don't have proof of what we said, Victor argued, his face turning a mottled red. It is your word against ours, and we are upstanding members of the community. You are just a bitter child. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had terrified me for my entire youth, and I felt nothing but a cold, clinical need to finish the job. "Ms. Vance," I said, "please refer to Exhibit B." I tapped the screen of my laptop. The room filled with the sound of static, and then, clear as a bell, Victor's voice from 9 years ago cut through the silence. "Just sign it. Scarlett, I don't have time for 20 questions. It is just standard liability release for the house, unless you want to pay for your own insurance starting today." Then my voice, young and hesitant, but it says promissory. Victor's voice again. Sharp, commanding. The voice of a man who does not tolerate dissent. "Sign the damn paper, Scarlett, or get out of my sight." I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was heavy. It was the kind of silence that happens when a bomb fails to detonate, and you are just waiting for the secondary explosion. Victor stared at the laptop. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He looked like he had seen a ghost. Marianne let out a small, strangled sob. Linda Vance wrote something down on her notepad. The scratching of her pen was the loudest sound in the world. "Mr. Ross," Linda said, looking up over her reading glasses, "that recording suggests you misrepresented the nature of the document to a dependent. In the financial sector, we call that coercion. In the legal sector, they call it fraud." She paused, letting the weight of the words settle on his shoulders. "Do you deny that is your voice?" she asked. It was the trap, the question I had prepared her for. If he denied it, he was lying to an ongoing investigation, and we could prove it with voice analysis. If he admitted it, he was confessing to tricking his daughter. Victor looked at the recorder. He looked at me. He realized he was in a glass box, and there were no exits. "I was parenting," Victor choked out. "I was managing the family assets. She was a child. She didn't understand the big picture." "The big picture," I said, "was that you needed $20,000 to cover a shortfall, and my credit score was the only asset you hadn't liquidated yet." Marianne suddenly stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. She threw her hands up, abandoning the grieving mother act for something more primal. "So what?" she screamed. Tears were streaming down her face, but they were tears of rage, not sorrow. "So what if we used it? We raised you. We fed you. We clothed you for 18 years. Do you have any idea how much you cost us? Braces, piano lessons you quit, clothes you outgrew? You owe us that money. Scarlett, you owe us everything." She leaned over the table, her face twisted into a mask of entitlement. "You are going to destroy your father over a few $1,000s? You are going to kill your mother for money? Is that what you are? A patricidal little greedmonger?" "Marianne, sit down," Victor hissed, trying to pull her back, knowing she was saying the quiet part out loud in front of a witness. "No," Marianne yelled, slapping his hand away. "I am tired of pretending. She is ungrateful. We gave her life. And she comes here with her recordings and her spreadsheets to humiliate us? You are nothing without us. Scarlett, you are just our genetic material that went wrong." I watched her. I watched the woman who had birthed me scream that I was a failed investment. I didn't yell back. I didn't cry. I felt a strange sense of finality. This was it. This was the bottom. "I am not killing you, Mother," I said quietly. I stood up. "And I am not doing this for the money. You can keep the $20,000. I have already paid it back to the universe by surviving you." I looked at Linda Vance. "I think we have established that the allegations of extortion are unfounded," I said, "and that the loan in question was obtained through coercion." "We have," Linda said, closing her notebook. "Ravenwood will be closing the ethics complaint against you and Mr. Bennett immediately. Furthermore, given the admission of fraudulent activity involving financial documents, we will be submitting this transcript to the compliance officers handling the Brightwater audit. Character integrity is a component of our vendor assessment." Victor slumped in his chair. He knew what that meant. It meant the audit would go from a review to a dissection. It meant they would look at every check he had ever written. "You can't do that," Victor whispered. It is a conflict of interest. It is due diligence, I said. I picked up my laptop. I picked up the folder with the loan documents. I have one last thing, I said. I pulled a sealed envelope from my bag. I slid it across the table to Victor. This is a formal cease and desist notice, I said. It states that neither you, nor Marianne, nor Cora are permitted to contact me, my husband, or our employers ever again. If you call my phone, I file a harassment suit. If you show up at my house, I call the police. If you mention my name in Charleston to save your reputation, I release the full audio library to the local press. Victor stared at the envelope. He looked old. The corporate armor had cracked, revealing a tired, desperate man underneath. Scarlett, he said. His voice was no longer commanding. It was small. We are your family. You only get one family. I know, I said. And I got a defective one, so I'm returning it. I turned to walk away. Scarlett, Marianne cried out, her voice breaking. Where do we go? What do we do? The wedding is ruined. The club will talk. We have nowhere to go. I stopped at the glass door. I looked back at them, two people sitting in a cold, gray room, surrounded by the wreckage of their own greed. I suggest you try being independent, I said. I hear it builds character. I walked out of the conference room. I walked past the reception desk. I walked to the elevator. When the doors closed, blotting out the sight of the Ravenwood offices, I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 9 years. My hands were shaking. Just a little, but my head was high. I checked my phone. There was a text from Noah. Car is out front. Engine is running. Let's go home. I typed back a single word. Ready? I wasn't an orphan. I wasn't a victim. I was just Scarlett Ross. And for the first time in my life, my balance sheet was clean. The official announcement went out on Monday morning, 48 hours after the disastrous brunch in the courtyard. It was a masterpiece of vague, polite deflection, printed on thick cream stationery and emailed to the entire guest list. It stated that Julian and Cora had mutually decided to postpone their union due to unforeseen personal circumstances and requested privacy during this difficult time. But in Charleston, privacy is a myth, and silence is just a canvas for gossip. The dominoes did not just fall, they crashed through the floorboards. While the guests were busy returning their blenders and crystal vases, Julian's family, the wealthy, established clan from Savannah, who had initially welcomed Cora with open arms, went into full damage control mode. Julian's father, a retired judge with eyes like flint, did not just accept the postponement, he launched an internal investigation. He hired a private forensic accounting firm, the kind that usually handles corporate espionage, to look into the woman who had almost legally bound herself to their estate. The results came back within 72 hours. They found the cracks in Cora's story immediately. The nursing degree she claimed to have was non-existent. The university had a record of her application, yes, but she had withdrawn after 3 weeks of introductory biology, citing medical leave. The clinical rotations she spoke about with such authority were entirely fabricated, pieced together from stories she had likely heard me tell or plots she had watched on medical dramas. But it was the strange documents in her file that truly terrified Julian's family. There were credit applications for jewelry stores, lease agreements for luxury vehicles, and a timeshare in Florida, all listing Cora as the primary owner, but using 3 different variations of her Social Security number. It wasn't enough to get her arrested immediately. The numbers were off by 1 digit, arguably typos, but it was enough to destroy any remaining shred of trust. She wasn't just a liar, she was a sloppy, habitual fraudster. While Julian's family was dismantling Cora's past, Ravenwood Compliance Labs was dismantling Julian's present. Noah called me into the living room on Tuesday evening. We were back in Atlanta, safe in our own home, but the war was still being fought on our screens. Brightwater just escalated, Noah said, turning his laptop so I could see the internal memo. They are not waiting for the final audit report. They have placed Julian on administrative suspension, effective immediately, All his billing privileges are revoked pending a full review of the last 36 months. I looked at the screen. 36 months. That went back exactly to the time Victor started consulting for him. He is going to lose his practice, I said. I didn't feel happy about it. I just felt a grim sense of inevitability. Brightwater won't keep a doctor who is under federal investigation. It is a liability nightmare. He is lucky if he only loses the practice, Noah said. If the DOJ gets involved, he loses his freedom. Julian is panicking. He sent 3 emails to the compliance officer today offering full cooperation. He is throwing Victor under the bus so hard, I am surprised the tires haven't popped. Back in Charleston, the social fallout was hitting my parents with the force of a hurricane. The thing about high society is that it tolerates cruelty, but it does not tolerate failure. As long as Victor and Marianne were the successful, beautiful couple with the perfect daughter. People looked the other way. But now the rumors were swirling that they had stolen from their own child. I heard from an old friend, a girl I went to high school with, who now worked at the country club, that Marianne had walked into the dining room for lunch on Wednesday. Usually, she would be greeted by a dozen waves and invitations to sit. This time, the room went quiet. The ladies who usually lunched with her suddenly found their salads incredibly fascinating. One woman, the wife of a bank president, actually turned her chair away physically. The whispers were specific. Did you hear about the loan? Did you hear they forged the signature? I heard they are insolvent. Victor tried to brazen it out at the golf course, but he was told that his tea time had been accidentally double-booked and he would have to wait. It was the polite Southern way of saying, "You are radioactive, go away." And then there was Cora, my sister, having lost her wedding, her groom, and her dignity, did the only thing she knew how to do. She tried to win the audience. On Wednesday night, she went live on social media. She sat in her childhood bedroom, the one that had been redecorated 3 times while mine was turned into a storage closet, and turned on the ring light. She wore no makeup. She wore a hoodie. She looked into the camera with big, teary eyes. I have been silent for too long, she began, her voice trembling with rehearsed vulnerability. I need to tell my truth. My sister, Scarlett, has always been jealous of me. She came to my wedding and made a scene because she couldn't stand seeing me happy. She made up terrible lies about my parents. She is trying to ruin us because she is bitter that she had to work while I had health issues that kept me home. It was a good performance, a solid B+. But Cora had forgotten one thing. The internet is undefeated. Within 2 hours of her posting the video, the comments section was a war zone. People who knew us from high school, people I hadn't spoken to in a decade, started chiming in. Health issues? You were captain of the cheer squad senior year. Cora, you were fine. Jealous? Scarlett was working 2 jobs while you were crashing your dad's BMW. Then came the receipts. A former coworker of mine from the diner posted a photo of me from 9 years ago, looking exhausted in my uniform, holding a textbook. The caption read, "I worked with Scarlett. She was the hardest worker I knew. Her parents would drive up in a Mercedes and honk for her to bring them free coffee. They are trash." Cora tried to delete the comments, but they came too fast. The timeline didn't match. Her story about being a sickly child clashed with photos of her on spring break trips to Cancun. Her narrative of me being unstable clashed with my LinkedIn profile showing a steady, successful career in corporate compliance. She ended the live stream abruptly. But the damage was done. She hadn't garnered sympathy. She had invited scrutiny and the internet, realizing it had a villain to dissect, started digging into the Ross family brand with ruthless efficiency. On Thursday morning, I received the email I had been waiting for. It was from the legal team at Ravenwood, but it was addressed to me personally, advising me on the civil matter I had inquired about. Subject: Preliminary review of loan documentation. Dear Ms. Ross, based on the audio recordings provided and the discrepancies in the master promissory note, Our legal counsel believes there is sufficient evidence to file a civil suit for fraudulent inducement and unjust enrichment against Victor and Marianne Ross. The coercive nature of the recording, combined with the misdirection of funds to a third-party account, constitutes a clear breach. We also recommend filing a police report for identity theft to formally sever liability. We are prepared to recommend external counsel to handle this filing. I stared at the screen. It was real. It wasn't just a feeling anymore. It was a case. I had the power to drag them into a courtroom and make them explain, under oath, why they thought my future was their piggy bank. I forwarded the email to Noah. Let's do it. I typed, that afternoon. My phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. A generic burner number, likely purchased at a convenience store. I knew who it was. I answered, but I didn't say hello. I just pressed the record button on my side. Scarlett, the voice said. It was Victor. But it wasn't the booming voice of the patriarch. It was low, raspy, and hurried. He sounded like he was calling from inside a closet. Victor, I said, you are violating the cease and desist. Forget the paper, he hissed. Listen to me. The audit is tearing us apart. They are asking for tax returns from 10 years ago. They are looking at the house flip. They are looking at everything. That is what auditors do, I said calmly. You have to stop them. Victor said, you work there. You can pull the file. You can say it was a mistake. Tell them you found the receipt. Tell them I paid you back in cash. I can't do that, I said. Because it is a lie. How much? Victor asked. The question hung in the air. Ugly and transactional. What? How much do you want? Victor asked, his voice desperate. I can move some money. I have an offshore account. I can get you 10,000? 15? I will pay off the loan. I will give you cash. Just make the call. Scarlett, name your price to end this. I closed my eyes. Even now, at the end of the world, he thought I was for sale. He thought everything was for sale. He didn't understand that some things, like dignity, like truth, didn't have a price tag. You don't have enough money. Victor, I said. You couldn't afford me when I was 18, and you certainly can't afford me now. Don't be stupid, he snapped, the anger bleeding through the fear. If we go down, you get nothing. You are killing the golden goose. The goose is already dead, I said. And I don't want your money. I told you that in the conference room. Then what do you want? He screamed. Revenge? Is that it? You want to see us suffer? No, I said. I want the truth to stand in its proper place. I want the history books to show that I wasn't the mistake. You were... Scarlett, wait. I hung up. I blocked the number. I saved the recording and sent it to the lawyer. Another brick in the wall. Another nail in the coffin. I thought that was the twist. I thought the bribe attempt was the rock bottom, but I was wrong. An hour later, my phone pinged with a text message. It wasn't from Victor. It wasn't from Marianne or Cora. It was from Julian. I hadn't heard from him since he walked out of the hotel room. I assumed he was busy trying to save his license or drinking himself into oblivion. I opened the message. There was no greeting. No, I'm sorry. Just a photo of a document and a single sentence. The document looked old. It was a scan of a trust agreement, dated from the year I turned 16. It was on letterhead from a bank in Savannah. Julian's Family Bank. I zoomed in on the photo. Trust name: the Scarlett Ross Education Fund. Grantor: Beatrice Ross, great-aunt. Trustee: Victor Ross. Initial deposit: $150,000. My breath caught in my throat. Beatrice. I remembered her. She was my father's aunt, a kind, eccentric woman who had died when I was 15. I thought she had left everything to charity. I read the text message under the photo. Julian. I found this in the discovery files my lawyer pulled for the annulment. My dad's bank managed the trust. It says the fund was established to pay for your college. Fully funded. I stared at the numbers. $150,000. Enough for tuition. Enough for room and board. Enough for books. Enough for a car. Enough so that I would never have had to work a single shift at a diner. Enough so that I would never have had to beg for a Gap loan. I read the next message from Julian. Julian. The account was drained. The withdrawal dates start the month you turned 18. The recipient account matches the one Victor used for the renovation. I dropped the phone on the couch. The room spun. It wasn't just that they refused to pay for my college. It wasn't just that they made me take out a loan in my own name to cover their debts. They had stolen my inheritance. They had taken the money that was specifically, legally left for my education. Money that would have given me the independence they claimed to value so much. And they had stolen it. They had looked me in the eye, told me I was poor, told me I was a burden, told me I had to scrape and save, all while they were spending $150,000 that belonged to me. The independent mistake wasn't that I was a burden. The mistake was that I was a piggy bank they had smashed open and then discarded the shards. I felt a scream building in my chest, a primal, jagged thing, but I didn't let it out. I picked up the phone. I forwarded the image to Noah. Twist, I whispered to the empty room. They hadn't just committed fraud. They had committed embezzlement. And unlike the student loan, which was a civil matter, stealing from a trust fund? That was a felony that carried a mandatory minimum sentence. The game had changed. I wasn't just suing them anymore. I was sending them away. The text message from Julian regarding the trust fund was the final key that unlocked the prison cell my parents had built for me. For 9 years, I had believed that I was simply unloved, a daughter who did not measure up to the family standard of excellence. But looking at the scanned document on my phone, seeing the jagged signature of my father authorizing the withdrawal of funds from the Scarlett Ross Education Fund, I realized the truth was far more clinical. I was not unloved. I was an asset class. I was a resource they had strip-mined to maintain their illusion of wealth. We did not go back to Charleston. We did not go back to the house with the renovated kitchen paid for by my great-aunt's legacy. Instead, we convened in a sterile deposition room in downtown Atlanta, a neutral ground where the air conditioning was set to a temperature that discouraged emotional outbursts. My parents were there, flanked by a lawyer who looked like he had realized halfway through the morning that he was not getting paid. Victor looked smaller than I had ever seen him. The bluster, the boardroom armor, the arrogant tilt of his chin. It was all gone. He sat hunched over the mahogany table, staring at his hands. Marianne refused to look at me. She stared out the window at the skyline, twisting a diamond ring on her finger that I now knew was likely paid for with the interest from my stolen future. The evidence is irrefutable, my attorney said. He was a specialist in forensic accounting, a man who found joy in spreadsheets. He slid a stack of papers across the table. We have the bank records from the Savannah Trust. We have the transfer logs. We have the corresponding deposits into the Ross joint checking account. And we have the withdrawal dates, which coincidentally align with the purchase of a luxury sedan for Cora Ross and a remodel of the primary residence. He paused, letting the silence stretch. And then, he continued, we have the student loan, a federal loan taken out in Scarlett's name, using her Social Security number, for $20,000, the proceeds of which were also funneled into the family account. You burned the candle at both ends. Mr. Ross, you stole the money intended to pay for her education, and then you stole her credit identity to borrow more money in her name. Victor finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed. It was a bridge, he croaked. We were having liquidity issues. The market had turned. Aunt Beatrice would have wanted the family to survive. She would not have wanted the money to sit there while we lost the house. The trust was specific, I said. My voice was calm. I did not feel the need to shout anymore. The facts were shouting for me. It was restricted for educational use. You didn't use it to save the family. Victor, you used it to maintain your lifestyle. You used it so you wouldn't have to be embarrassed at the country club. We intended to pay it back, Marianne whispered, still looking at the window. We always intended to pay it back, once the investments matured. But they didn't mature, I said. And instead of admitting you were broke, you kicked me out. You told me to be independent. You shamed me for needing money. You watched me work double shifts at a diner, knowing you had $150,000 of my money sitting in your renovation budget. I took a breath. That is not parenting, I said. That is predation. We did not settle. My lawyer advised me that a settlement would usually be the fastest route, but in this case, the fraud was so layered, so systemic, that we needed a court order to untangle it. I filed a civil suit for conversion, fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. We also filed a police report regarding the student loan. I did not do it to see them in handcuffs. I did not do it to see them humiliated in the press. Although the local papers in Charleston were already running headlines about the Ross family collapse, I did it to clean the slate. I wanted a legal document, signed by a judge, that stated unequivocally that I owed them nothing and they owed me everything. The fallout was swift and absolute. Julian filed for an annulment 3 days later. There was no tearful goodbye. There was no dramatic scene in the rain. He simply had his lawyer send the paperwork to the house where Cora was hiding. He cited fraud as the basis for the dissolution. In the section for the reason, he wrote a single sentence that was leaked to the press by a clerk at the courthouse. I declined to marry a fabrication. Julian lost his contract with Brightwater. He lost a significant amount of his standing in the medical community, but he cooperated with the federal audit. He turned over every email, every text message, every fraudulent invoice Victor had urged him to sign. Because of his cooperation, he avoided criminal charges, but his career in Charleston was over. He moved to the Midwest a month later to start over in a small practice where nobody knew his name. He was a man who had learned the hard way that if something looks too perfect, it is usually a lie. Victor and Marianne tried to fight the civil suit. They tried to claim that the money was used for my general welfare as a child, but the judge, a stern woman who had clearly read the file in detail, blocked their motion immediately. She froze their assets. She ordered a forensic audit of their entire estate. The house on the river was seized to pay back the creditors. The Mercedes was repossessed. The club memberships were revoked. When the judgment finally came down, 6 months later, it was total. The court ordered the restitution of the full trust amount plus interest. Since they did not have the cash, the liquidator sold off everything they owned, the antique furniture, the jewelry, the art collection. It all went to auction. I received a check for $180,000. It was the sum of my stolen inheritance, plus the interest it should have earned. The student loan was discharged by the Department of Education after the police report confirmed identity theft. The debt that had hung over my head, the secret burden I hadn't even known I was carrying, vanished with the stroke of a pen. I held the check in my hand. It was enough money to pay off our mortgage. It was enough money to buy a new car. It was enough money to go on a vacation around the world, but I didn't want it. That money felt heavy. It felt like it was covered in the dust of my parents' lies. I opened a new account. I established a scholarship fund called the Beatrice Ross Memorial Grant. I set the criteria specifically for students who had been estranged from their families or who were financing their own education without parental support. I appointed a board of trustees consisting of Noah and 2 independent educators. I wrote a clause into the charter that was ironclad: no individual with the surname Ross, or any relation to Victor and Marianne Ross, may administer, access, or influence this fund. I used the money to help girls who were exactly like I had been, scared, alone, and determined. It was the only way to wash the money clean. It was structural repair. It was turning a crime scene into a garden. As for Cora, she did not go to prison. The district attorney decided that while she was a beneficiary of the fraud, she was not the architect. She was just a participant, but her punishment was, in many ways, more severe than a jail cell. She lost the story. She was no longer the golden child. She was no longer the rich girl with the nursing degree. She was a 24-year-old woman with no education, no work history, and a name that was toxic in her hometown. She had to move to a suburb of Charlotte, where nobody knew who she was. I heard through the grapevine that she got a job as a receptionist at a car dealership. It was an honest job, It was a real job, for the first time in her life. She had to wake up at 7 in the morning, drive herself to work, and earn a paycheck that wasn't signed by her father. She tried to reach out to me once. A year later, she sent a friend request on social media. I deleted it. I didn't hate her. I just didn't know her. The sister I thought I had was a fiction. The woman who existed now was a stranger, and I wished her well, but I wished her well from a distance. The final scene of this chapter of my life happened on a Tuesday night. It was raining, a soft, steady rhythm against the glass of our living room window in Atlanta. I was standing in the kitchen, the kettle was whistling. I poured 2 cups of chamomile tea. The house was quiet. It wasn't a big house. It wasn't a mansion on the river. It was a 3-bedroom bungalow with a mortgage we paid ourselves. Noah walked in. He had just finished a call with the office. The audit of Brightwater was officially closed. The system was clean. He walked over to me and wrapped his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. "It is over," he said softly. "Yes," I said. "It is." I looked around the kitchen. I looked at the fridge covered in photos of us. Real photos. Candid ones. Not staged portraits for a society magazine. I looked at the calendar where we had written down our plans for the weekend. I thought about the word my mother had used as a weapon against me for so long. Independent. She had meant it as an insult. She had meant it as a synonym for unloved, unwanted, and abandoned. She had used it to justify her theft and her neglect. But as I stood there, holding the warm mug of tea, leaning against the man who knew every scar on my soul and loved me anyway, I realized she had been wrong. Independence wasn't about being abandoned. It wasn't about being cold or hard or alone. Independence was the power to define your own value. It was the ability to look at the people who created you, realize they were broken, and choose not to be broken with them. It was the freedom to walk away from a transaction that was costing you your soul. I had paid a high price for my ticket out. I had paid in years of loneliness, in missed holidays, in the agonizing ache of wondering why I wasn't enough. But looking at the peace in my own home, I knew the investment had finally paid off. I turned off the kitchen light. The darkness wasn't scary anymore. It was just rest. "Tea?" Noah asked, taking his cup. "Tea." I smiled. I took a sip. It tasted like honey and warmth. It tasted like the only thing that mattered. It tasted like mine. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Lucy Revenge Stories. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while driving to work in London? Cooking dinner in Texas? Or relaxing in Sydney? Please drop your location in the comments below so we can see how far our community reaches. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and smash the hype button to help this story get recommended to more people who need to hear it.